President Oliver Tambo. Today, we are supposed to be guided by his ethic and by his personality as we are leading through these difficult times. Without wasting any minute, Llewellyn, can you do for us the roll call?
Thank you, Chairperson. Uh, I have yourself, Honorable Mbinko Gigaba. I have Honorable Aduans, Honorable Siwela, Honorable Morwa Setla, Honorable Machezi, Honorable Van der Walt, Honorable King, Honorable Mashabela, and Honorable Nobo. I know that Honorable Sukers is joining us shortly. She's just got the link back. And I have one apology for a member of the committee, and that is for Dr. Tembekwayo, who is in the Higher Education Committee as we speak. Also received apology from the Office of the Minister for her unavailability. And then DG Mweli is linked to the meeting, but he's currently on oversight visiting schools on the ground. But he will be intermittently in the meeting and out, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Llewellyn. DPE, DM.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, honorable members. Good morning, colleagues, officials from the Portfolio Committee and officials from the Department of Basic Education, officials from Umalusi, if they are here in the meeting. And Chair, we want to take this opportunity to thank you for inviting us to come and brief you on the readiness for the examination. As Chair, you would know that the readiness is two-twined. There's this readiness of the preparation of learners to sit for the examination and the readiness to administer the examination. So these are two things, because if one fails, it looks like even the other did not do well. So, and this year is a year of coronavirus. Our learners missed most of the time, but our teachers are hard at work, and the commitment of the learners, we believe that we will be there, though things look a bit whatever, but the attitude of the learners, the attitude of parents, and the attitude of teachers will make the 2020 NSC successful. It is, of course, administered in a different style with a huge number that the sector has never administered such a big number, 1 million learners writing, candidates writing at the same time. Want to welcome the DG also that is here. The team earlier on was to be led by Dr. Mabuya, but if the DG is here, is the one who's going to lead. Minister is in the cabinet committee. We agreed then that let me come here so that she remains there. So, Honorable Machese, I'm here with the permission of the minister to lead the delegation from DBE. Allow me, Chair, to give to the DG, if where he is, there is a network, or failing which Dr. Mabuya should take over. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, Honorable Members, Honorable Deputy Minister. Honorable Deputy Minister, the team is still led by Dr. Mabuya. We'll be working with Dr. Polia and Mrs. Weston. As indicated, Honorable Deputy Minister will be coming in now and again. So thank you very much. I'll request Dr. Mabuya, Dr. Polia, and Mrs. Weston to start with the presentation, if it's fine with you.
It's very fine. It's fine. Over to you, Dr. Mabuya.
Dr. Polia, and Mrs.
Thank you, DM. And morning to honorable members.
Over to you, Dr. Mabuya.
DM, as you have already indicated, we will be presenting on the state of readiness in terms of the writing of the NSC exams in 2020. We have prepared a 140 slide presentation that will be taking you through. And in terms of readiness, as you have already indicated, DM, we're looking at readiness at two levels. At the level of the learner, whether we have been able to provide the necessary support to learners for them to be ready to sit for these exams. And that part will be dealt with by Mrs. Weston. We've got the second part, which is looking at the readiness of the examination system. How ready are we to be able to administer the exams in 2020? And that part will be taken through that part by Dr. Polia. Without any waste of time, if you allow me, DM, then I'm going to invite them to take us through their respective parts. Mrs. Weston, please.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Take us through your section. Thank you, DM.
Thank you.
Morning, Honorable Deputy Minister, Honorable Chairperson, and Honorable members of the Portfolio Committee. Good morning, DG and Umalusi Senior Management that is in the meeting. I'll be sharing with you today the extraordinary interventions that have been provided by our schools, our districts, our provinces to ensure that the learners are ready for the NSC examination. We know that this year, COVID-19 has really forced us to, with different limitations, to adapt how we respond to the pandemic. We had extended loss of teaching time, and that necessitated the development of a recovery plan for grade 12. An extensive recovery plan included the cancellation of the June examination, the shortening of the vacation, limiting the preparatory examinations to three weeks, and also to ensure that learners are ready for the final examination by doubling our efforts in terms of learner support. I will be also in terms of learner readiness, indicate that learner readiness is really, or academic support largely, is really entrenched in our schooling sector. We have systemic inequalities that was really further exposed during the pandemic. We have this year a class that had unprecedented disruptions that we've never seen before. They had to learn and be taught in a unique educational context. Therefore, the efforts to ensure that the sector provides support, including supplementary material, vacation classes, after school and weekend programs, teacher training, using volunteer teachers to assist, and alternative ways of ensuring that our learners are exposed to the best possible teaching in this year. Learner support generally is organized around 4 themes. One of the themes starts in the beginning of the year with measuring the impact of, in fact, using our assessment data in the beginning of the year to firm up our plans. And this year was no different. In the beginning of the year, in January, provinces then also firmed up their plans based on the performance of the 2019 NSC results to guide them as to which areas they should be focusing on as part of the support. We then move over in the second quarter around measuring the impact of the interventions to improve our learning outcomes, and therefore we intensify the support that's provided to learners in the second quarter. We do know that this year this was slightly different because our disruptions we focuses on our fourth quarters largely around the administration. Quarter in 2020 is almost merged into one due to the disruptions that we had earlier. Generally, all provinces and the DBE has focused on these 7 areas of intervention largely. There are differentiations between provinces, but all provinces instituted ICT support, especially this year during the hard lockdown periods, and many of them are still continuing, which I'll share with you later in the slide. We worked on the provision of additional LTSM, especially this year, to ensure that learners are provided with the necessary study guides, revision material. I'll also share more of that in the presentation. Our extra tuition, which has largely been decentralized and is taking place at school base mostly, but there are also camps dealing with specific learners, and these have taken place either in the mornings, afternoon, and weekend classes. Curriculum coverage, especially this year, has become critical to ensure that learners not only cover the curriculum, but then we take them through a process of preparation or revision for the examination. Our teacher development initiative has also been heightened this year. We also seen a large increase of peer-led study groups, that is learners and using various online platforms, especially during the lockdown and vacation periods, to ensure that they, in smaller study groups, are able to support each other. In 2020, the provision of psychosocial support in light of the pandemic has really become a key support measure. Our starting off or kicking off the support from the DBE has really been led by the Director General when he started in January with high-level meetings with all senior managers in the provinces. That includes your circuit managers, your curriculum managements, as well as school principals. There were 27 meetings conducted around the country, and the meetings reflected on various aspects, but most importantly, there was a reflection on the National Senior Certificate results, both from the provincial side and from the DBE side, to provide insight. Then it moved on to curriculum areas, including curriculum delivery and implementation for this year, as well as support that is required for the class of 2020. These then informed the improvement plans, and this meeting focused on evaluating the improvement plans that has been developed by province with a view of identifying key areas for gaps that exist to ensure that these are closed as we move on. During the hard lockdown period, the DG then went on to conduct one-on-one meetings with all provinces. These were virtual meetings, and 198, these meetings are still ongoing, although not happening on a weekly basis at this stage. The main purpose of those meetings was to ensure that, first of all, provinces, schools, districts are ready for the reopening of schools. And then secondly, what key areas, and in every segment of the year that we've had these meetings, there were key areas that had to be focused on to ensure that especially curriculum and assessment progress of the learners are measured. So it was creating an enabling environment for teaching and learning despite the pandemic and all the limitations that was brought about, but also focusing on curriculum and assessment support. As the DBE, we also led in terms of the provision of support for this class, which included the ATP reorganization, provision of study materials, and ICT support. In terms of the annual teaching plans, I must hasten to add that in 2020, despite the challenges that this class have had, there has been no trimming of the grade 12 annual teaching plans. This class of 2020 has been exposed to the entire curriculum that all the other classes prior to 2020 has been exposed to. We reorganized and repackaged the ATPs in order to guide teachers to ensure that the curriculum has been covered. Further, to improve or to create more time for teaching, there was a reduction on the number of school-based assessment tasks. As I have mentioned, the cancellation of the June examination and the reduction or amendment in most cases of the practical assessment tasks. These amendments, especially in the case of practical assessment tasks, were largely determined by the pandemic protocols and restrictions that came into play this year. There's also a large focus on the provision of resources. As the DBE, prior to the lockdown, but in particular during the lockdown period, the DBE then really heightened its ICT support to the learners, starting off with a broadcast program that has been broadcasting lessons to learners from the beginning of April. The lessons was largely based on ensuring that we cover content starting from term 1 and slowly working our way through the year. There was also a number of digital content that was distributed to provinces for uploading on their websites and provision to the learners. The state-owned textbooks were available and mindset broadcasting solutions were also used. The DBE also at this, especially during the lockdown period, zero-rated educational websites, and this is an ongoing process to ensure that learners are able to access the information at especially on our provincial and DBE websites and a number of partner websites at zero rates. Um, as I've mentioned, from the beginning of April, we started with the DBE channel broadcasting lessons in all our high enrollment subjects. These are subjects that the majority of the learners offer during the NSC examinations. And it started off, like I said, from term one, working systematically through the entire curriculum at this stage. It was then heightened at the beginning of September, where we focused or we started off with the HOSA Matric program. This program, as you probably have heard, is a program that we broadcast daily, 4 hours a day, 7 days a week. We focus on completing the curriculum with the learners, and then at this stage, we are now focusing on live Q&A lessons that are being broadcast live to allow learners to interact and prepare for the examinations. These are largely, it started off with 6 subjects. We then added another 4 at the beginning of October. And these are the subjects that is offered by the majority of learners that will be sitting for our end of year examination. Our HOSA Matric program, in addition to academic support that it provides, it also provides psychosocial support and community support, which is tips for parents on how to support learners, especially through this difficult period as they prepare for the exam. As part of our HOSA Matric program, we've also introduced a very rigorous monitoring and evaluation system in order, and that includes interviews with learners, in order for us to determine if the value of the offering to the learners and what we could do in future if we are offering such to learners. As we know, ICT will become, or a blended approach in providing support will really become part of our support programs moving forward. This slide is just sharing with you some of the support that has been provided by partners to our learners, also to ensure that our learners have access to the best possible resources on ICT. Provinces, as I've mentioned in the beginning, our provinces have been providing academic support to learners since prior to 2020. So learner support to this class did not start in 2020. We see here, for example, in the Eastern Cape, how they started when this particular class was in grade 8, providing them support in particular subjects that that learners were not performing well in. The support also includes support to teachers to ensure that the quality of teaching that's being delivered in classrooms are improved. If we look at the Eastern Cape, like I said, for example, there's technology, our EMS subjects, which is the base subject to our business studies, accounting, and economics subjects, support has been provided. When the class was in grade 10, history, geography, business studies, which include extra material, common SBA tasks, common examinations, presentations on how to ensure that learners are able to write improved essays and are able to respond to source-based questions. In business studies, the extra tuition that has been offered, especially around Saturday, weekend, and holiday classes, provincial SBA tasks that are administered, set at provincial level to ensure that there's a common standard that is maintained. Radio lessons. It's important to notice that the class of 2020, one of the unique features of this class is this will be the first class who's writing a reorganized or reformatted business studies and accounting examination, other than, in fact, in differentiating from the previous classes. So this is the first class, and we can see here that support for the new format of the examination, which means they now write two examination papers as opposed to one previously, have started already in grade 10 to ensure that learners are familiar with the new structure of the examination papers in paper 1 and paper 2. If we look at the Free State, some examples is how the Free State also intensified their support already for this class in 2018 by starting with lesson broadcasts on the IBP programs in all the key subjects: accounting, business studies, mathematics, mathematical literacy, physical science, technical mathematics, as well as life sciences. These subjects are historically known to be subjects where learners struggle at the end of the NSC examination, and we can clearly see how provinces already then started providing support for these learners. There was also centralized marking of particular subjects, and that is particularly done to ensure that the standard of marking is of an appropriate standard and teachers are exposed to what will happen at the end of the NSC examination. There's also competitions like the provincial mathematics competition and especially your technical competitions to ensure that learners are provided with additional support in readiness for the exam. In grade 11, Free State also, in addition to the IBP lesson broadcast that they had, they also provided standardized tests and examinations in March, June, and December in all the high enrollment subjects. And this is once again done to ensure that a particular standard is maintained. In Gauteng, for example, we have the Litnum strategy that is being implemented, which focuses on mathematics and language support for your grade 8 learners. And the same happens in grade 9. Also, Gauteng implements what is known as the InterSense strategy, where they provide support to identify 454 underperforming secondary schools, which focuses on your English first additional language and mathematics through the entire intermediate and senior phase. Teacher training programs are also implemented to ensure that teachers are able to improve the quality of teaching. KZN introduced what is called the mathematics 1+9 intervention, which is derived from the 1+4 intervention, which ensure that clusters are supplied with resource material, common cluster tasks are set. Teachers are capacitated in the lower grades to ensure that the foundational knowledge is really entrenched into the learners to ensure that the FET can build on the solid foundations in the GET phase. In grade 9, it largely focused on mathematics as well, where lead teachers were trained in a number of challenging mathematical concepts and to be able to deliver it effectively. In Mpumalanga, I can just quickly share, we can see on the slide how Mpumalanga is focused from grade 8 on particular areas such as teacher training, provision of scripted lesson plans, extra lessons. They also started providing differentiated support for learners and teachers based on the performance of schools. In the Western Cape, for example, we see in grade 10 a focus on the language, home languages, and the various methodologies that was used, for example, a telematics platform in the Western Cape, as well as various online activities that are used in addition to face-to-face classes. This is also support that was provided by the Western Cape when these learners were in grade 11, and one would clearly see that the focus has been on what we regard as the high enrollment or the key subjects. In the year 2020, however, one can see that the support that has been provided in previous years are now heightened in 2020. Besides the initial provincial plans, the arrival of the pandemic and its implications on teaching and learning has further ensured that provinces find innovative ways to still provide support despite the challenges that was brought about by the pandemic. For example, we've seen in a number of provinces an increase, especially during the hard lockdown level, an increase of ICT and online platforms to ensure that teachers and learners are provided with or the learning continues despite learners being at home. For example, in the Eastern Cape, we can see that 55,000 tablets were provided to grade 12 learners in quintiles 1 to 3. That includes data and digital content to ensure that learners are able to access. A virtual learning studios have been established, and these studios during the lockdown period has broadcast lessons to learners to ensure that learning continues. All provinces, also a key feature that has been there for a number of years is the radio lessons that have been provided, especially starting in the first term, but it was increased during second, third, and fourth term as we move into closer to the examination. The Free State provided the learners with question banks from 2014 to 2019, as well as the Mind the Gap study guides. Live lessons were also provided as part of the IBP support. Now, the internet broadcast platform of the Free State has been a program that's been in use for a number of years. It's not the first year that they've used this. What they've done is actually really just every year to increase the scope and reach of this particular platform, which include the provision of, and all learners in the Free State receive all the lessons that are broadcast on DVDs to be able, for them to be able to use it as they prepare for examinations and tests alike. Textbooks and study guides were also provided, particularly in digital format during the lockdown period. And Gauteng provided lesson notes or revision notes on every subject per topic to learners. That includes worksheets and marking guidelines which learners could use to support their self-directed learning. Language, literature, and comprehension resource packs have also been provided. The province have also created the YouTube channel where they provide electronic lesson plans and PowerPoint presentations, as well as videos to ensure that particular topics are really streamed to learners. The province has an extensive range of radio lessons. They made extensively use of both national radio stations as well as community and regional radio stations to broadcast lessons. This is an ongoing process which started in April, and it has just been increased in terms of its intensity to support the learners. They also assisted in developing some of our television lessons, which we are currently broadcast as part of the HOSA Matric program. In KwaZulu-Natal, a strong focus on package lessons for teaching and learning, but also utilizing the HeyMaths and the HeyScience platforms. KZN also have the eFunda educational portal, which they also use to support learners, especially during the lessons. In terms of hard copy support, those includes notes, worksheets, and assignments that are being provided to learners, including our sign language learners in KZN. Radio lessons on community radio stations have been ongoing, and they provide recorded and live lessons for 12 subjects on difficult topics in 26 using 26 community radio stations, 3 radio stations, and 1 national station. I must hasten to add that the DVE has provided to each province a package of radio lessons starting from April, and it will end in December, to be able to utilize that to support especially our class of 2020 with particular lessons. KwaZulu-Natal also benefits from the telematics program from the Western Cape Department of Education and the University of Stellenbosch in order to further increase their support to their learners. Limpopo has largely focused on providing revision booklets in accounting, maths, literacy, geography, and business studies. That was then further added on, excuse me, or supported by package lesson plans and radio lessons on community radio stations. Limpopo, part of even in previous years, a large part of their support was on community and regional radio stations as part of providing support to the learners, especially in the languages. Mpumalanga focused on printing copies of past question papers. They also made use of the HeyMaths and HeyScience platform. They also have a unique academy like that they use, the Ligbron Academy, for streaming of lessons, especially your MST subjects, to schools that are connected to the academy. They also broadcast lessons on radio in a number of radio stations in unique, not only Mpumalanga, there's actually 2 provinces who have this very innovative and unique support, which is referred to as a dialer tutor, where learners are able to call in, and immediately a learner call, the call will be cut, but the learner will receive a call back, and during that call back, the learner will then receive support for a particular subject, where he's able to ask questions on a one-on-one basis, and expert teachers and subject advisors are on the other side of the line supporting learners. That particular program is also instituted now in the Northwest as part of their package of support for the learners. In the Northern Cape, a large focus on Saturday classes, especially during term one. I must just highlight that all provinces started their support during the term one, not only when the lockdown hit. So in most cases, especially in the beginning of the year, that early start allowed, in fact, benefited this class of 2020 because they were able to ensure that the curriculum is covered. And once the curriculum was adequately covered, most of the support could then focus on revision and examination support for learners. Northern Cape also use itinerant teachers, which for particular subjects, the high enrollment subjects, which visit particular schools and at particular schools offer lessons for the learners that they struggle. They also make use of educational applications such as HayMath and Hay Science, which their learners benefit from. In the Northwest, provided summarized materials or notes to learners and worksheets per topic to ensure that all learners are exposed, and question papers and memos are provided. Past question papers and memos are part of this support program. They also use of various portals to access educational content or to provide access to learners, and WhatsApp was used extensively also in the Northwest. When it came to the broadcast lessons, Northwest also have a number of radio stations where they offer classes, and that started even prior to COVID. But like I said, due to the pandemic, the frequency of such lessons has been increasing. Northwest is also another province that have the dialer tutor for 10 high enrollment subjects in order to provide one-on-one support to learners remotely. Western Cape focused on self-directed lesson plans, which they provided per subject, per topic, per week, to ensure that learners are able to take ownership of their own learning and work whilst being at home. They provided a guideline pack for teachers, learners, and parents to ensure that parents are able to support learners, especially with at-home learning. PowerPoint presentations are provided, as well as worksheets and interactive lessons. The Western Cape telematics program is not just used in the Western Cape, but it's also shared by 4 other provinces, are also benefiting from the Stellenbosch interactive lessons that are being beamed to connected schools. They have online broadcasts, especially like their websites, which learners are able to access a number of online content. It's important to notice that the support that's being provided to province is not to learners in all provinces. It's not just a one-size-fits-all approach. All provinces have very differentiated support packages for we used to have 4 categories of learners, which is our progressed, our learners at risk, our high flyers, and our average performers. But also this year we added support for learners with comorbidities who are at home, and also other learners that are learning from home due to parental choice. Provinces then went on to develop and dedicate specific support based on the targets, on the needs of the target market, to ensure that support is really aimed at the learners. While one can look at the Eastern Cape, for example, radio lessons, in the development of the radio lessons, it all depends who the audience or who the target audience is. Lessons are then written to fit that particular need while it's being broadcast to everybody, but the target audience is actually very, very specific. That includes even the provision of additional LTSM, like our Mind the Gap study guides and past examination question papers and worksheets that are provided. In the Free State, for example, learners at risk were exposed to weekend classes and camps, specific IBP and radio broadcasters aimed at them, as well as provision of printed revision material. When we look at KwaZulu-Natal, the high flyers, for example, learner camps were arranged previously and are continuing to really focus on that niche learners to ensure that they are prepared. Learners with comorbidities, for example, were provided with lessons and activities which they could complete at home. A matric booklet is provided, which help learners, which guide learners how to prepare for the examination. There's a host of radio and television programs that were available for learners to use during this particular period. In Mpumalanga, in terms of the progressed learners, if we look at, they had provincial camps that are planned, especially now that have already run some of them. There's circuit-based learner camps as well as school-based learner camps. The spring classes are planned for high flyers, for example. As I said, the camps are particularly geared at a particular type or category of learner to ensure that the teaching that takes place is at the level of the target audience. When we look at the Northwest, for example, they provided especially materials aimed at learners at level 1 and 2. These are our low performing learners to ensure that you move performance up into a level 3, level 4 level. Learners, excuse me, the Mind the Gap study guides are also provided based on different categories of learners, and that dialogue tutor program and radio lessons are also, like I said, provided to those learners. In the Northwest, learners with comorbidities, for example, schools are monitored to ensure that those learners are receiving support whilst being at home, and schools are guided how to accommodate, and teachers specifically provide support for such learners. In terms of the Northern Cape, when one considers their support for progressed learners, these are learners who have progressed from grade 11 into grade 12 this year. And Dr. Pole in his presentation would, for example, share with us the numbers around progressed learners. But we will see that in the Northern Cape, large focus on part of their support for progressed learners is around psychosocial support. It is a key intervention that the province has been implementing for a number of years, but in this year, for example, have really increased exponentially. There's also Saturday and lock-in classes and the big shows, what they call big shows, which have taken place, especially in Q1, as we kicked off the additional support to the class of 2020. There's the third column there highlights all the subjects, and one can see there's really a large number of subjects that were accommodated, especially as part of the support program. The Western Cape, like I said, a large part of their support is how they provide differentiated support is through the telematics program, which is shared not only by the Western Cape, but like I said, a number of provinces. The revision program that is also offered on the e-portals and provided to schools and learners. Printed copies are also provided to the schools, and then the weekly lessons. We now at this stage of the year where all schools all around the country are now geared up in their final, what we generally refer to as the final push, to ensure that all efforts are now really intensified to move learners towards the examination, or to walk them to the gate of the examination doors, as one can call it. In terms of the Eastern Cape, they provide daily support at schools and monitor the support that's being provided. There's also learning and teaching materials that are being provided. That includes, like I said, past question papers, they study tips for success. They provide digital resources such as radio lessons, but also in all provinces, and Eastern Cape is no different, extra classes take place. Now, one must understand due to the pandemic and its limitations, a number of these classes are now decentralized, taking place at school with teachers, either from base teachers who are sourced from neighboring schools, to ensure that learners are exposed to the best possible teaching. In addition, in many provinces, certain categories of learners are brought up into camps with the highest standards of safety being maintained, to ensure that learners are then provided with necessary support. In the Free State, for example, one can clearly see that the focus for the Free State in their last push will be on schools that perform below 80% in their preparatory examination. The last push programs take place. Most of them started on Saturday last week, but there is a number who started on Monday and will continue through walking learners, especially, like I said, to as we start the examinations in a few weeks. The The preparatory examinations in all provinces are analyzed, and provinces then target their support based on what the data has provided them, where the gaps are, where the challenges are. And all across the country, all our schools are currently offering such, either at school level or at particular learner camps, if one can call such. Gauteng focuses on the sub camps. They also run a number of camps for particular category of learners, and that includes, for example, focusing on, or it's based on the preparatory examination. During these lessons, there's intense revision programs taking place that focuses on those key content areas that learners still struggle with despite interventions. They also include mock examinations as part of their preparation for the examination. KZN focuses on their revision program largely. This program focuses on, or their revision program is largely around camps that's being organized at school level or in the various, during the spring vacation period to ready learners. Weekend classes are also offered by Limpopo province in the 11 gateway subjects, and these include your, it's in fact culminates in your spring classes, radio lessons, as well as the broadcast program on Limpopo television that they use. And in Mpumalanga, there's learner camps organized for your high flyers. These are your top performing learners as well as your progressed learners in all the high enrollment subjects. Spring camps are also offered for learners from 111 underperforming schools. And in Mpumalanga, these are the schools that perform below 70% in the National Senior Certificate. Mock examinations are also part of their preparation for the final examination. In the Northern Cape, spring schools are being offered at various camps around the province, and currently the province or those learners are being tutored in a number of targeted subjects. Saturday classes are also offered on an ongoing basis. This was particularly the case in all provinces starting from August, moving into September and October. All schools were offering additional classes on Saturdays and Sundays to ensure that learners are, first of all, prepared for the preparatory examination, which they have been writing, and now the focus is on the final examination. In the Northwest, they have on-site study programs, which include dedicated study sessions at school, but also teaching that takes place in all subjects. They also have extra classes, radio lessons, and they have a large portion of their learners doing being hosted in dedicated learner camps. In the Western Cape are particularly focused on Saturday tutoring lessons, which they do in most cases virtually, where learners are able to either be in a general center with lessons being beamed to them where they are, or learners being able to log in remotely and be able to access the classes. There's also in all the schools, I'm currently in the Western Cape monitoring some of the schools. In all the schools, there are classes running on an ongoing basis to ensure that learners are prepared for the examination. All these efforts are really monitored on a weekly basis. We can see that the DG started monitoring the weekend classes, like I said, which started around August, September, October. On a weekly basis, there's a team led by the DG out in provinces monitoring the functionality of these classes, really trying to understand what is being done at these classes and how learners benefit from such classes. A large part of this monitoring is also about providing support for the province, the district, and the learners to be able to ensure that they are motivated, especially during this very, very difficult times with the fear and anxiety that our learners are facing for the National Senior Certificate. Because despite the fact that this was a very, very unusual year that we would all agree to, this class of 2020 are subjected to the same NSC examination in terms of quality, in terms of its standard, that any other previous class are subjected to. So they have so much to overcome in order for them to get ready. But DG has been monitoring in all provinces, and we can see this is some of the sessions where learners are being addressed and motivated. And at this stage, we have, DG has monitored during that particular process 123 lessons at that stage. This has increased further. Right now, the focus of monitoring is now on the spring classes that are taking place all around the country. And as I said, there's a whole contingent of the DBE who are now monitoring these classes to ensure the readiness of learners for the NSC. In terms of our learners support, despite the challenges that COVID-19 has brought about on teaching and learning, provinces, schools, our learners, and our teachers have found innovative ways to counteract these challenges. We have seen a massive upsurge of partners, stakeholders, and civil society that has come on board to ensure that the class of 2020 receives all the possible support to be able to ensure its readiness. As I said, despite the abnormal context, this class are subjected to a same high quality and high state examination, which will determine the rest of their future. Whilst we have shared with you some of the significant efforts that have been made by our provinces and our schools, and the additional support that have been provided to these learners, the entire impact of the pandemic at this stage, it remains an unknown and therefore a concern. So provinces are continuing, as learners would be writing the examination, to start after the final push or as part of their final push, dedicated sessions to prepare learners on a daily basis for the subjects that as they are writing their examinations. We have to commend honorable members as the DBE, our teachers and our school management teams for their resilience in really having shown bravery despite, especially at the height of the pandemic, to ensure that the class of 2020 receive optimum support. At this stage, I would like to hand over to Dr. Polia to take us through the next part of the presentation. Thank you, Dr. Polia.
Thank you, Cheryl. Good morning, Honorable Chairperson. Morning to our Deputy Minister. Morning to honorable members. And I think what Cheryl has done is given you a confident indication that as a department, we've done whatever's possible to make sure that our learners are ready to write the exam. But now comes the important part of making sure that despite the disadvantage and the anxieties that our learners have been subjected to, that they write an examination under the most conducive conditions. Honorable Chairperson, I think you and I are fully aware that the most important examination that any one of us writes is the matric examination. And it's rather unfortunate for the class of 2020 that they, looking forward to this exam, would now have to write this exam under some difficult conditions. And therefore, we as a department are going the extra mile to make sure that we administer the exam under fair and conducive conditions. In the first slide, I present just an indication of what this examination cycle entails. It's an 18-month cycle, which means we commence with the setting of the question papers 18 months before the date of the exam. We then move on to registering candidates, registering centers. We also have to manage the school-based assessment, the moderation, prepare centers for the writing, and we work in conjunction with Umalusi every step of the way to make sure that whatever we do meets with the high standards that are set by Umalusi. And this entire 18-month cycle culminates with the release of the results by the minister, and finally, if Umalusi is satisfied that all processes have complied with their standards, the certificate is then released. I then move on to give you an indication of what is the scope and size of this exam. I think our Deputy Minister has alluded to the fact that this will be the largest examination that this country has conducted. Now, it's large simply because we are combining the June examination, which candidates would have written in May, June, with the normal November examination. And we're bringing together 5 different cohorts that would have written this exam together. So that makes the exam more complex. So it's complex on a number of fronts, complex given the 5 different cohorts that are writing this exam, complex because of almost a doubling of numbers, and thirdly, the need to comply with COVID regulations. But nonetheless, I must say, Honorable Chairperson, that we have a very strong collaborative relationship with our provincial departments, together with our social partners and other stakeholders. And we've been working non-stop, meeting on a near weekly basis to make sure that we explore every option and create the best conditions for the conduct of this examination. In the next slide, we give you an indication of the numbers that will be writing the exam in terms of the different categories. And the biggest group would be our NSC full-time candidates that are at school, which is 616,000. And then we have the part-time cohort that writes the November exam, traditionally 113,000. Our June candidates, which are in the main senior certificate candidates, 167,000. And the June examination, in fact, focuses on 2 qualifications. We have senior certificate candidates and NSC candidates. And these NSC candidates are repeat candidates, which includes your MEO candidates from the previous year. And that gives you the 155,000 full-time and the 5,000 part-time. And that gives you the total of 1,058,699 candidates in total. In the next slide, we then give you an indication of how do the numbers in 2020 compare with the numbers of 2019. Now, Honorable Chairperson, there's been concern about are we going to have a massive dropout rate in this 2020 exam? But what is interesting, if you look at the full-time figure, which is the figure at the bottom left-hand corner, in 2019, we had 616,754 full-time learners writing the November examination. And these are our full-time learners who are at school. And in 2020, we have 616,021 candidates, a difference of 733 candidates, which therefore means there has not been a significant dropout in terms of grade 12 learners writing this exam. There's been a small dropout, and possibly the figure of 733 indicates that these could be the dropout. Now, on the last column, you look at the differences between 2019 and 2020. Obviously, we're concerned with provinces like Limpopo, where there's been a big change from 2019 to 2020, and we will investigate the reason for that 14,000 difference between 2019 and 2020. The next slide gives you an indication of what the numbers have looked like over the years. And what we're observing, Honorable Chairperson, is that we've reached a degree of consistency from 2017, 629,000, 624,000, 616, and 616 this year. Obviously, the peak in 2015 and 2016 can be attributed to the policy on progression, which was introduced in 2015, and that increased the numbers. But that is now tapering off in terms of numbers. In the next slide, we now look at subject numbers and how do subject numbers compare. And if you look at this table, Honorable Chairperson, we're comparing numbers over years. And if you look at the figures here over 5 years, obviously we're monitoring particular subjects. And the subjects that we've been paying much attention to are subjects like accounting and business studies in the last 2 to 3 years, where the numbers have been dropping. Now, what I can report based on the figures we observe here is that the numbers in accounting have gone up, the numbers in business studies have gone up, and in economics, the numbers are more or less stable, a difference of 378, which is not a significant change. Obviously, we're still concerned about our numbers in mathematics and physical science. And I think all the programs that we are implementing will certainly begin to bear fruit further down the line. The next graph is an indication of what the subject numbers look like so that we can see this graphically. I'm not going to waste time on that. What I'm now going to do very quickly, Honorable Chairperson, is just to take you through this exam process and to give you an indication of how we've managed some of the challenges that have confronted us because of increased numbers, COVID compliance, and managing these 5 core. This slide gives you an indication of the registration of candidates, what it entails, and all I can say is that we are on track. And on the next slide, I present some of the challenges that have confronted us, and obviously the 5 different cohorts, but we have a special subcommittee which deals with system administration issues. And as I'm presenting now, they are meeting at the moment to deal with 1 or 2 issues. So this committee, which comprises of provincial experts relating to the system and dealing with issues like registration, have managed this process. This was the first year that we've now gone with electronic uploading from SASAM, and therefore we have to monitor this very closely. There were some errors, but all of this has been sorted out through our multiple stages in terms of verification and confirmation of prelim schedules, sending back schedules to schools, to principals, getting them to verify. We also had this unique situation of candidates registering for both June and November, because candidates under normal circumstances register for June and register for November. Now we can't have candidates registered for 2 exams, and we had to deal with that duplicates, and that was done through a manual process. On the next slide, we move to center registration. We need to make sure that every center where that exam is conducted meets with the prescriptions of our regulation. And we do an audit of every center. Our focus is on independent centers, because independent centers are managed by independent managers, and we are dependent on the Umalusi accreditation process. If a center is not accredited, or if a school is not accredited by Umalusi, we then take over the exam based on a concession arrangement we have with Umalusi, and that all has been organized. So no independent center that's not accredited is allowed to administer the exam. We also have what we call designated centers, and designated centers are there to cater for part-time learners. And these are centers that are managed by provincial departments and district officials. In this slide, we look at some of the challenges that we've experienced with regard to center registration. Obviously, the larger numbers. So this year we'll be using community halls, church halls, and unfortunately, the reduction in the social distancing from 1.5 meter to 1 meter has assisted us, given the fact that in public exams, we've always gone with the 1 meter social distancing. Obviously, there is the challenge of informing your part-time candidates of some of the COVID rules. Sometimes there may be a change in venue because we're combining venues, but we think we'll be able to manage this through our advocacy programs and public communication platforms that we use. Moving on to the next slide, we now talk about question papers. And as Cheryl has mentioned, we have not tampered with the standard of the examination. And all the efforts that we have put in are efforts to insulate this matric exam, particularly with regard to its standard. So these question papers are papers that were set prior to COVID, 149 of them, 40 non-official language question papers, and that gives you a breakdown of our adaptation of question papers for our ELSA learners.
Yeah.
And we've already set question papers for the June 2021 exam, and 60% of them have been approved by Umalusi. So we can confidently state that the standard of the exam would be the same as any examination that has been written in previous years, with question papers are moderated by Umalusi and finally approved. We only print question papers after we get the go-ahead from Umalusi. These are some of the challenges. Obviously, examining panels have not been available to do the final checking and approval, but I think we managed to deal with that. And also, in terms of panels that currently come to the DBE to set question papers, we had to limit the number of panels, and there could be a late finalization of our June 2021 question papers, but we're dealing with that with Umalusi. Moving on to printing, packing, storage, and distribution. This slide gives you an indication of where we are with printing. Now, this was the information as of the 14th of October, and we've moved beyond that point. And I can tell you that all our provinces are above the 30% point, even those that indicated 10%. Now, for some of the provinces, it may appear as if we are quite low, and given the fact that the exam starts in a week's time. But in exams, over the years, we've come to use what is referred to as the just-in-time principle. You cannot print question papers well in advance, have them stored, and be exposed to the risk of a paper leaking. So currently what we do is question papers are printed, packed, and ready in accordance with the timetable, in accordance with the period in which they are written. So question papers will be packed and ready a week before when they are ready to go off to the storage point. So we have a clear plan in place for each province, and that is being monitored by us. So we are confident that we will meet the target in terms of the printing of question papers. On the next slide, we talk about the audit of storage points. And like I mentioned, every storage point with question papers are going to spend 5 days or less. We conduct a physical audit. And the physical audit is conducted in terms of key criteria, which looks at where question papers are stored. Do we have a double locking system? Who's the key holder, custodian? And all of that must comply with the criteria that we provide. There's some interference on the line. I hope it's not me. Holder, custodian, and all of that must comply with the criteria that we provide. Okay, I think there's an echo, but I'll continue. Now, in the case of the Western Cape is the only province that has a different distribution model, but we've audited their model, and their model basically entails question papers being stored at a school. So in the case of the Western Cape, we have now evaluated every school as if it were a storage point, which means it must comply with the same criteria as the storage points of other schools in terms of the strong room policy, the double locking system, and the key custodian policy, and the like. Now, what makes the Western Cape model acceptable is the fact that it has what is referred to as a smart locking system, where even though the batches are with school, they only get opened centrally just before the examination commences, and that's based on an SMS that sends out the code to the different schools. So we're confident of that. And on the next slide, we give you an indication, and I'll not spend too much time. Every province, what is the number of storage points? What is the status? It could either be fully approved, partially approved, or not approved. And where this storage point is not approved, we will not have question papers stored. We have storage points and nodal points. Nodal points is where question papers spend just one night. But even there, we make sure that the criteria are adhered to. Moving on to the next slide, which gives you some of the challenges. I spoke about using the just-in-time principle, and the fact that we had two provincial departments printing at GPW. So with two printing at one point, we had to manage that very closely. But one of them, which is Northwest, has completed the printing. So we're out of the woods in terms of printing at GPW. Adherence to COVID-19 protocol, I mean, that's being very closely monitored. We were concerned that we may have inadequate storage given the doubling in numbers, but provinces have managed to secure additional space, and that will help with the storage. Moving on to writing, and I'm mindful of the time. Writing, we embarked on a massive invigilator training program. And what was different this year, Honorable Chairperson, is that we've used video recordings of what an actual classroom needs to look like. And that has certainly assisted. Much of the training had to be virtual, so the video recording certainly helped. And the preparatory examination was a good test run, whether our final exams are going to run well. And I must say that we've had very little problem emanating from our preparatory exam. We've also done an audit of all centers. And if you look at the next slide, Honorable Chairperson, it gives you a breakdown of public centers, independent centers, and what we call designated centers. And we've categorized each center in terms of its risk profile. It could be either low risk, medium, high. Now, what do we do? If a center is regarded as high risk, we have what we call a resident monitor based at that center for the entire duration of the exam. If a center is medium risk, we have what we call a roving monitor who will be there and manage a cluster of centers. If it's low risk, it's subjected to our normal monitoring. And if you look at the numbers, most of our centers are low risk, given the fact that we've put in mechanisms in place to make sure that they are not presenting a high exposure to risk. Now, the slides following give you an indication of each province and the risk profile, and I'm not going to go through all of them. We can move on to the next slide on the writing and what were some of the issues. Obviously, in number of invigilators was a problem in some provinces, but we've appointed private invigilators. We're also using unemployed teachers, shortage of monitors, but I can say that our provinces have come to the party. We've set a threshold of at least 70% of the centers must be monitored during every examination. And at least 2 provinces have now committed to making sure that 100% of the centers will be monitored. The shortage of writing venues, I think we've dealt with that through the alternative venues that we found. I spoke about non-accredited independent centers, which we've dealt with. Invigilator training has gone well. School-based assessment, which is the next slide, is always a challenge. And this year, obviously, the challenge was compounded by the fact that we could not do much face-to-face moderation, but we've resorted to virtual mechanisms of moderation, and that process is ongoing. In fact, we have a team that will be going out from today to do some kind of provincial moderation in our provinces, in selected schools, and I will point that out in the next slide. In the next slide, we provide an indication of the DBE moderation when it's being conducted, and we moderate not just the SBA as we know it, but also the practical assessment task, the sign language, observing and signing, as well as LOCAT together with oral. So all aspects are moderated, but on a sample basis based on our capacity. In the next slide, we give you a further indication of the subjects that we will be moderating. And obviously, we have a national sample and we have a provincial sample, but we'll go past that slide in the interest of time. The challenges, obviously, not having to be able to do as much face-to-face moderation, but we think we are dealing with that through our adapted moderation systems. And we did tweak some of the assessment tasks to cope with the COVID conditions. And those are being monitored also very closely. Moving on to marking, which are the next group of slides. Marking is always an area that we want to do our best, because this is where the actual judgment takes place. And getting 48,000 markers to make sure that they deliver to a common standard is certainly our goal. Marker selection has been completed, Obviously, there are some shortages which provinces are dealing with, but we don't think that the shortages are a major issue simply because we extend the number of days marking. We have marking guideline standardization meeting, 149 meetings, which will be convened over a 1-month period, where every marking guideline, where we go through the marking guideline, question by question, response by response, taking cognizance of inputs from every provincial department where you have a chief marker and internal moderator represented, to make sure that we finally come up with a credible and a marking guideline that includes all alternative responses. Now, for the first time this year, these meetings are going to be conducted virtually. We've conducted the meeting for LO already, and it has gone reasonably well. So in the next slide, Honorable Chairperson, I present to you the different modalities. Modality 1 deals with where we have a mixed mode of virtual plus face-to-face, and that will be in our high-stake subject, but the bulk of the subjects will be virtual meetings, and we are planning for that. And this year, our meetings will go right up to the 30th of December, given the fact that the exam only concludes on the 15th of December. In the next slide, I give you an indication of the number of markers that will be appointed per province, which is inclusive of internal moderators, chief markers, deputy chief markers, senior markers, and we're looking at a figure of 45,809. And in the next slide, we give you an indication of the number of marking centers, 180. We had to increase marking centers this year, given the social distancing and the larger numbers. On the next slide, we look at what DBE will do is an audit of the PED marker selection. We want to make absolutely certain that every marker that is appointed complies with the criteria that are contained in the policy document. So we do an audit, and obviously the audit is done on a sample, but whatever issues are picked up in the sample has to be looked at in the context of the broader population of markers that are being appointed. Some of the challenges that we experience in terms of marker selection, obviously the shortage, and provinces had to go back on a second round of application because many markers may not have applied because the marking was scheduled to take place in December. But now that the marking is taking place in January, circumstances would have changed, and therefore we've attracted more marker applications through that process. We also have appointed more reserve markers so that if markers do not pitch up because of one problem or the other, we have a 20% reserve. We've also increased the number of our novice markers. It's normally 10%. We've increased that to 15% just to take care of the larger numbers we have. We may have disruption at marking centers, but I think we've accommodated that. There was also disruption in terms of marker selection because of COVID cases, but we had to resort to virtual monitoring. And we are also making sure that provinces are ready in terms of their infrastructure to manage the virtual meetings that we are organizing. And we're doing an audit of every province and making sure that they comply. Going to monitoring, which is a critical part in any examination of this magnitude, we're looking at appointing additional monitors, and we have what we refer to as part-time monitors who we will send out. And here again, we're looking at unemployed teachers. Provinces will report to us on a daily basis in terms of what they're picking up at the exam centers. And this year, it will not just be irregularities, but they will also be reporting to us on COVID-19 cases of learners that are recording a temperature above 38 degrees. And we also have one or two of our provinces who are using online monitoring system. With regard to irregularities, we are set in terms of mechanisms, structures to manage irregularities. And I think our system has become highly vigilant in picking up irregularities and dealing with them appropriately. The minister, together with the MECs, were involved in a pledge signing ceremony. And I think when learners commit themselves publicly to a pledge, it does something to their sense of morality and making sure that they comply. Mark capture, I think we are on track. We will observe whatever is required in terms of making sure our centers are COVID-19 compliant. And we are also working closely with our NAT joints and prof joint to pick up any strikes that may disrupt any aspect of the exam. Load shedding, we have a very good relationship with ESCOM, and our CAT and IT exams have gone very well. Moving on to the post-exam processes, just to give you a sense of the dates, which is on the next slide. This year, the exam is moved such that results will be released on the 23rd of February. The minister will make an announcement on the 22nd, and Umalusi standardization will take place on the 3rd of February. So we have moved the entire process, which certainly now impacts on the commencement of the next academic year. In the next group of slides, Honorable Chairperson, I'm not going to spend a lot of time. What we've done is we've now consolidated the evaluation of the key processes, and we've taken every province, every key process, and we have determined whether the province can be classified as good, whether there are moderate concerns, and whether there are serious concerns. And just to give you an example, we can move on to the next slide. Overall, we think that we are on track with exam preparation, and we think that we are ready to pull off a successful examination in terms of these 4 key areas in terms of our exam. Then moving to every area, and I'm not going to go through each slide. The next slide talks about staff capacity. I think we're concerned about the 3 provinces where there are staffing issues, but through our DG, we are dealing with this. But I can guarantee the portfolio committee that these staff shortages will not in any way impact on the examination of this year. Staff are highly committed. They work long hours to make sure that every process is carried out as per plan. If you look at registration, it's all green. We can move on to the next, which talks about registration of centers. We are also all green in terms of registration of centers. Printing and packing, I think the amber is just those that are possibly slightly behind, but it's nothing to be concerned about. We then move on to storage and distribution. It's Western Cape that has an amber because we have to monitor them closely, given the fact that question papers are stored at 500 different schools. The writing of the exams, it's all green in terms of our preparation. Our marker competency, which is the next slide, we are fine there as well. It's all green. Marking organization, we are on track, so there's no concerns there. Monitoring, like I said, we are above 70% in most of our provinces in terms of the scheduled monitoring. And if one looks at handling of irregularities, all systems are in place. The next area, which is school-based assessment, is on amber, and I think that will remain amber for some time, given the fact that we really need to improve our teacher competency with regard to school-based assessment. But I think the safety net is that Umalusi conducts a statistical moderation, which makes sure that where marks are inflated or where marks are depressed, they brought back so that they are aligned to the examination mark. Mark capturing, we're on green. And then finally, we go to what are the risks? There are about 8 risks, Honorable Chairperson, that we are managing, and they are listed here. And I'm not going to go through each one of them. Obviously, we're concerned about a second wave, but we are putting contingency plans in place to deal with the second wave. Protest action. There may be infections at our exam centers, but we have alternative centers. We have clear protocols in place as to how each center will deal with whatever may arise at a center. On the next slide, we talk about the other risks which relate to load shedding. I spoke about our relationship with ESCOM. We're still conducting the exams in Eswatini, but our DG convened a meeting with a senior delegation from Eswatini, and we're confident that given the fact that KZN manages the exam on a daily basis in Eswatini at the one center, it's only one center, UTEC, there's no need to be concerned about the credibility of the exam. Space, we've dealt with that, shortage of markers, completion of SBA, we continue to monitor that. So in conclusion, Chairperson, I think this is certainly going to be an extraordinary exam, but we've put in extraordinary measures. Obviously, curriculum coverage has been closely monitored, and from the reports that we're getting from our one-on-one meetings, the curriculum has been covered across the board, but we will continue to monitor this, and we're going to be looking at learner responses post the exam to give us a confirmation that the syllabus was covered. We've covered all the identified risks, and there may be new risks that will emerge. We're dependent on important role play like Umalusi to be constantly alerting us in terms of what we need to look at. So that's it from us, Honorable Chairperson. Thank you for your time, and thank you. We may have gone slightly above the time. This is the presentation on both the learner readiness and the system readiness for this very important 2020 NSC stroke senior certificate exam. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Dr. Polia. Members, we've done a mistake of not adopting the agenda. Can we adopt the agenda of the presentation from DBE and also Umalusi, so that we can proceed with Umalusi doing their presentation? Any hands to just adopt the agenda?
Hello.
Shabalala would like to move for the adoption of the agenda.
Thanks, Mashabalala. Any seconder?
Suela second.
Thank you very much, Honorable Suela. Who is leading Umalusi?
Good morning, Honorable Chairperson. It's John Volmek, the Chairperson.
Okay, Doc. You can start with then your input, and then immediately after yourself, then you can proceed with the presentation.
Yes, thank you. I just want to also acknowledge honorable members, as well as the Honorable Deputy Minister and the senior officials of the department. Good morning to everyone. I would like to just start by introducing...
Can somebody mute Siwela, please? Siwela? Thank you. Apologies, Doc.
Yeah, no problem. I would just like to introduce the delegation from Umalusi. Firstly, I would like to tender an apology on behalf of the CEO of Umalusi, Dr. Mafu Rakumetsi, who is currently on leave. I would also like to introduce Ms. Zodwa Madumekwani. She's the Executive Manager, Quality Assurance and Monitoring, and the Acting CEO. And in a few minutes, I will hand over to her. Then there's Ms. Mary Louise Madalani, the Senior Manager for Quality Assurance of Assessment for School Qualifications. Also with us is Mr. Andy Tulo, Manager Monitoring and Evaluation, and then Mr. Lucky Ditawaneani, Senior Manager Public Relations and Communication. It's my honor, Honorable Chair, to lead the Umalusi delegation in this important meeting to present our work in relation to the DBE's state of readiness to conduct, administer, and manage the combined June and 2020 NSC examinations. As the previous speakers have alluded, there is no doubt that due to this new novel virus and the resulting COVID-19 pandemic, the 2020 academic year has been a very peculiar year and unprecedented in many ways, and for many sectors of society, including the education sector. And as a result, the academic year in South Africa has been severely affected by the national lockdown uh, and all the regulations associated with it. Uh, for example, the assessment bodies were forced to reschedule their mid-year examinations. And this means that this year, a combined cohort, as has been explained, of candidates who were supposed to write mid-year exams and those who were registered for end-of-the-year exams will form part of the same cohort for the final exam. Now, we have no doubt that this would put a strain on our systems, including Umalusi's capacity to conduct quality assurance of assessment. However, with proper planning, we believe that the challenges presented by COVID-19 are not insurmountable. One of Umalusi's legislative mandates is to ensure that assessment bodies conduct credible assessments and examinations of the qualifications registered on the General and Further Education and Training Qualification Sub-Framework. And on an annual basis, before the assessment bodies can conduct the final examinations, Umalusi monitors the state of readiness of all the assessment bodies to examine these qualifications. So in 2020, we monitored DBE's state of readiness to conduct, administer, and manage the NSC examinations. And to achieve this, Umalusi had to put measures in place, sometimes new measures in place, to fulfill its quality assurance mandate, while observing stringent health and safety measures to comply with regulations under the state of disaster. So in conclusion, Honorable Chair, I wish to express my gratitude and appreciation to the DBE for making the necessary preparations for the combined June and November 2020 National Senior Certificate examinations under these trying circumstances. And I hope that the findings identified during the different audit and verifications conducted will be addressed before the commencement of the examinations. I will now hand over to Ms. Madhumakwani to introduce the presentation, and she would be followed by Ms. Mary Louise Madalani, who will present the findings. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Good morning to the Deputy Minister, Honorable Chairperson, and Honorable members of the Portfolio Committee on Basic Education, to DG and the senior officials of the DBE, Umalusi officials, and also the Portfolio Committee officials. As the Prof has indicated, we thank you for affording the opportunity to brief the Portfolio Committee on the readiness for the 2020 NSC examinations. I'm not sure whether the slide is showing correctly. I will start off the presentation by giving an overview of the presentation. The presentation will be presented as follows: Umalusi mandate and regulatory framework, and we'll go through the framework for quality assurance of assessment, which defines what we do, and then the approach that we use in determining the state of readiness, and the findings on the state of readiness to conduct the 2020 exams. And then finally, with the conclusion, I will introduce the presentation and then hand over to my colleague, Mary Louise Madalani, who will deal with item 4 of the presentation outline, that is the findings on the state of readiness. The mandate of Umalusi is stipulated in 2 acts, that is the NQF Act as well as the GenFEDQA Act. And then the SOR is informed by this mandate. And if you see on this slide, as a quality council, as Umalusi, we are required to develop and implement policy and criteria for assessment for the qualifications that are registered on our sub-framework. Then with regard to quality assurance, we expected to develop and implement policy for quality assurance. And then SOR, or state of readiness, involves or entails checking or assessing the assessment body's compliance to this policy for quality assurance. The second function as a quality council is to ensure the integrity and credibility of quality assurance. And this we do by identifying the risks that may compromise the credibility of the quality of the assessment. And then thirdly, we ensure that the quality assurance as is necessary for the sub-framework is undertaken. And the state of readiness is a way of ensuring that the quality assurance as is necessary is undertaken. Then in terms of the GenFEDQA Act, the Council must perform the external moderation of assessment of all assessment bodies and education institutions. And then the fourth section, subsection of Section 17A, the Council may adjust raw marks during the standardization process. And then also the key is that the Council must, with concurrence of the Director General and after consultation with relevant assessment bodies, and approve the publication of results of learners if the Council is satisfied the assessment body or education institutions has complied with the following. For the purpose of this meeting, I will focus on subsection 5.1, that is that the assessment body has conducted assessment free from any irregularity that may jeopardize the integrity of the assessment or its outcomes. And the focus here is that it's not only the outcomes, it's the assessment. That means by assessment, we refer to the assessment processes. So state of readiness is meant to ensure that we identify any issues that may jeopardize the integrity of the assessment process as well as the assessment outcomes. And if you observe, the key words in the two X are the following: is integrity, its credibility, and quality assurance. So state of readiness is then centered around the three keywords or three focus areas: ensuring integrity, ensuring credibility, and conducting quality assurance. Then in terms of the framework for quality assurance of assessment, the framework determines the quality indicators for state of readiness. According to the slides, we say we ensure credibility by achieving and by doing the following. Number one, moderation of exam question papers. I think that Dr. Paula has referred to that. That was done in 2019 already. And moderation of all the assessments, practical assessment tasks, as well as the common assessment tasks for life orientation. Monitoring and moderation of SPA, that is underway. Monitoring the state of readiness to conduct, administer, and manage the examination, and that is what we are reporting on today. These three bullets, basically, they outline the pre-writing phase or the preparatory phase of the examination. Then when from there, after the preparatory phase, we move to the monitoring of the conduct, administration, and management of assessment and examination processes. We conduct the monitoring and moderation of marking. We also manage the concessions and exam irregularities. And also during the state of readiness, we look at the capacity of the assessment bodies to also conduct these processes. We also responsible for standardization of assessment outcomes. As the Act says, we must ensure credibility of assessment outcomes. We approve the publication of results. And then this process, the main outcome is the certification process. That is the outcome of each examination cycle. So what we do, we have to put systems in place to ensure that there are credible assessment processes and assessment bodies that will lead to credible assessment outcomes and to certification. In terms of the approach adopted for the state of readiness, Umalusi adopted a risk management-based approach as its strategy to evaluate the level of preparedness of assessment bodies to conduct the NSC examination. The intention in making use of the strategy was for Umalusi to timeously identify the areas with potential risk, which may likely compromise the delivery of a credible exam, and then advise the assessment body accordingly. This was done through the following processes. We conducted a desktop evaluation, that is a state of readiness evaluation instruments were sent to the assessment bodies, and then the assessment bodies were required to conduct their self-evaluation. And after we received the self-evaluation reports from them, then we also used the self-evaluation reports to determine a risk profile for each provincial education department. So we look at their self-evaluation and we conduct a risk analysis and provide feedback to all the assessment bodies, including the provincial education department. Then the next phase was evidence-based audits. The evidence-based audits basically is to confirm the evidence that was submitted and also the evaluation that was conducted by the assessment bodies. So this process is then used to verify the submitted reports against the evidence available at PED level to confirm that the assessment of the PED is in line with the evidence provided. Then in 2020, as Prof has indicated, that this is a unique year, unlike the previous year where audits were conducted physically on site visitations to the PEDs. The audits in 2020 were administered through online engagements and through submission of relevant evidence based on the quality indicators that are determined for each process. Then this is the strategy that was followed in terms of documentation that we received from the DBE and the procedures or processes that we followed in evaluating the evidence that we received. So basically the 3 sets of reports were instrumental in providing useful information in the finalization of the State of Readiness report for 2020, considering the COVID-19 constraints. Briefly, I'll just give an overview of the findings, and my colleague will go into a little bit more detail. Currently, we can confirm that the 2020 registration of candidates is finalized. I think this was alluded by Dr. Polia as well, and the final enrollment information is available. And we take note of the PEDs are ready to provide the admission letters to the 2020 candidates for the November 2020 exam cycle. The question papers for 2020 were approved last year. Only a few were moderated this year. I think Ms. Weston has indicated the few. It's basically the business studies, accounting, and I think the practical subjects. All PEDs commence with the selection and appointment of marking personnel later than usual due to the lockdown restrictions. However, all PEDs have finalized the appointments, and Umalusi verification of appointed markers is underway and will be completed prior to the start of the November 2020 exams. The audit of exam centers to host the March, June, and November examinations are finalized in all PEDs. And this is something that we'd like to commend the DBE for making sure that is done, because as indicated, this is a unique year. More centers were required, but this is concluded and we are pleased with the manner in which it was managed. The number of marking centers also had to be increased across the PEDs due to the number of scripts expected from the examination centers and also to adhere to the social distancing requirement. Chair, I will now hand over to my colleague, Mary Louise, to deal with the summary of findings and conclude the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Memodi Makwani, and good morning to Honorable DM, Honorable Chair of the Portfolio Committee, honorable members of the Portfolio Committee and the Portfolio Committee officials, as well as greetings go to the colleagues from the DBE. I will now look at the issues that we found when we were dealing with the individual focus areas, because we divide our work into looking into items that we regard as important towards the preparedness of assessment bodies to conduct the upcoming examinations. The first slide there is focusing on the management. How ready was the management of the different assessment bodies found to be? With our verification, we found that the PEDs were ready, except for the fact that there were about 3 assessment bodies which showed a lack of staff in certain positions. And I think Dr. Polia has alluded to that they are being taken care of. And we hope that measures that are put in place will address this matter before the examination is conducted. The next focus area is the registration of candidates. Registration of candidates, we also appreciate, we have noted that all assessment bodies, or rather all PEDs, were able to register their candidates. Different systems were used, but the information that we concentrated on was on the SASMs, as well as the system used by the Western Cape, which is SIMIS, and we were happy with what we found. And there we can declare that the registration of candidates was done well, and all the candidates are registered to can sit for the coming examinations. We are satisfied with that focus area. The next focus also looks rather on the same issue. We looked at the size that I'm not going to speak to. We are all aware now that this is a big examination that is coming. And with the registration, really, I also want to reiterate what Memo Dimakwani said, that the department is really commended on this hard work of being able to register this number of candidates. Remember, they come in their different shapes and forms. Some are immigrant candidates, some are candidates who wrote last November, some are candidates who were supposed to write in June, but the system was able to manage and make sure that each and every one of those candidates is registered. We're just looking forward on the administration of examinations for this large number of candidates. The next slide speaks to the size and magnitude again, where we have divided the numbers according to the PEDs. The DBE has spoken to that, and the information that I have here, we have received that from the DBE, so it's similar to what Dr. Polia has spoken to. And we then move to focus area 2A, registration of candidates. It's exactly what I was talking to, that candidates are being registered. The only issue that I've alluded to earlier is the fact that there were some few glitches here with the immigrant candidates, where the criteria for immigration status, some of the candidates did not meet that, but we are happy to announce that the PEDs that have such cases are working with the candidates so that no candidate is going to be disadvantaged. The candidates will be able to write their examinations. The next one is registration of exam centers. Exam centers are being registered, a lot of them, seeing that we need to, or the departments and the assessment bodies need to meet the regulations on social distancing. So more centers were being registered, and those met the criteria for registration of centers. At Umalusi, we also have what we call a red accreditation status. That means those are centers who are flagged not to have been accredited by Umalusi, but with our findings, all the PEDs were able to adhere to the requirements by Umalusi that if an assessment, rather a center is not accredited, measures have to be put in place by the assessment body to make sure that those candidates at the end of the examinations are going to be certified, because according to Umalusi policy, if the center is not accredited, candidates that write at such centers are not certified. So then the PEDs take charge of those centers so that then the candidates are safe when they write their examinations, and the PED is able to account for those candidates. To this date, I can say all centers that are going to be writing examinations are registered, are correctly registered, and those that are not accredited, they have been given a concession by Umalusi that they can write the examinations. And that is also a move that we appreciate, since last year we had cases where there were centers that were not properly accredited and there were challenges with the resulting of those candidates. The next item here shows the centers that are being registered that Dr. Polia has spoken to, the number that are the number of designated centers and the number of independent centers. Those are the extra centers besides the schools that we have. The DBE has spoken to that. Can we then move to focus area school-based assessment? That was also spoken about. This is underway. Part of Umalusi staff, it's at one assessment, rather PED now, dealing with the moderation of SBA. As you can see, the slide was prepared to say SBA on 27 October, which is today. They have started with that. And at the end of the process, the moderation of the DBE will have been verified, and that will then support what the DBE will present to Umalusi at the end of the examinations as the SBA marks for the candidates. Printing, packaging, distribution of question papers, that has also been spoken a lot about by Dr. Polia. Umalusi, on its verification, we found, or audit, we found that we are satisfied with the measures that are being put in place. There are access controls here, and then the assessment bodies, the people who are working there or the staff, they have signed the declaration forms, which they have signed the declaration forms, which then will make us sure that these people that are appointed are the right people to be working in those environments. Printing and packaging across the 9 PEDs, the following are in place: management plans for printing, packaging, and distribution of exam question papers and related materials. Measures for quality assurance of printing consignments are in place. Level of security at storage rooms across the printing, it's also in place. Strong room managers are appointed. We are all satisfied with all those issues that are put in place for the printing, packaging, distribution of question papers. And that was done based on the criteria that the National Department has put in place. The criteria is listed there for your perusal, and we satisfied that all those printing places have met the criteria. Focus area number 5, which is the conduct of exams. Here we were looking at how are the assessment bodies prepared to monitor the upcoming exams. And again, our concern is a large number of candidates that will be writing. Also, how are they going to be able to adhere to the COVID-19 regulations? And with our audit, we realized that all exam centers of this year of 2020, they were being audited by the assessment bodies to make sure that they meet the COVID-19 regulations. Each of the 9 PEDs have profiled the exam centers according to the 3 risk levels: high, medium, and low. And that is one issue that Dr. Polia spoke to, that those that did not meet the criteria, they will not be able to conduct the examinations. In line with the national approach, administration of exams in all high-risk centers is taken over by the PEDs, meaning that the center will not administer the exam on their own, but the Provincial Education Department will take responsibility for that. Again, on the conduct of exam, the coverage target determined for monitoring have been determined across the PEDs. The national DBE determined 100%, but we also heard from Dr. Polia that some PEDs will be able to do 100%, others will do 70%, but measures are in place for those that are not able to do 100%. They will make sure that they do the 100 when we have large subjects like the languages, or where we have home languages and first additional languages. And the 3-tier monitoring model hierarchy is adopted by all the 9 PEDs. And this implies that monitoring will be at provincial level, district, and circuit levels. National protocols on health and safety for monitoring of the writing of exams have been developed, and strict adherence on its compliance will be monitored across provinces, districts, circuits, and exam centers. And I must say that these national protocols of health and safety, Umalusi went through those, and we're satisfied that they're going to assist the centers to be able to meet the required standards for COVID-19, and also to be able to monitor these large exams. The PDs have put alternative control measures in place to achieve the target that I've spoken to. Measures for managing the strong room keys have been put in place. PDs have effective strategies to enhance the training of invigilators. Resident monitors will be deployed to all identified high-risk centers. Provincial invigilator training sessions adopted different modalities, and Dr. Polia referred to those modalities and indicated to us how those assisted in making sure that our invigilators understand the process of invigilation. Modalities used here, we've got face-to-face training, online platforms that I'm not going to repeat, Dr. Polia has spoken to. But as Umalusi, we satisfied that these models assisted in making the invigilators understand their roles in the invigilation of the coming exams. Increased number of invigilators. Because of the large number of candidates that are writing, the different PEDs have increased the number of invigilators, and the measures put in place, Dr. Polia explained that in case there are shortages in invigilators, different PEDs have put in place measures of getting extra invigilators, either by appointing external people, retired teachers, etc., and making sure that those kind of people that they appoint are meeting the criteria for one to be an invigilator. Conduct of exams, again, approach for training of monitors. Also, monitors that are going to be monitoring the examinations, they also had to be trained, and there was a face-to-face and an online mode for training, and all PEDs have trained their monitors, and I think in all PEDs, monitors are ready to undertake this massive task that is coming. All PEDs develop comprehensive integrated monitoring plans earmarked to address the nationally predetermined monitoring coverage of 100%, which we spoke to earlier on. And with those plans, we had an engagement with them, and we satisfied that the plans are going to be able to assist the assessment bodies, the PEDs, to meet their targets. Marker selection. Marker selection also, that brings to us the idea that we need more markers since we've got more scripts to mark the same. And the PEDs have done their best in appointing markers, and according to the PEM as well as Circular 13, which was issued by the DBE, that all markers that are appointed must meet the set criteria. And to make sure that they are able to mark all the scripts in certain PEDs, they have then adopted a staggered marking plan, or they have increased the number of marking days so that they are able to make sure that all the scripts are marked, and the markers that they have are not going to experience fatigue. They will have enough time to deal with it with the marking. It was noted that COVID-19 brought challenges to the recruitment of markers that was spoken to earlier on, but to this date, when I speak here, we're satisfied that the markers are being appointed. New applications were done through online. That is just the process that was followed to make sure that markers are appointed. The next slide speaks to the number of marking centers per PED and appointed markers. The figures are there as compared to what was the in 2019, what we have in 2020, and the figures as they are indicated there, we're satisfied that these numbers will be able to manage the large number of scripts that have to be marked. Here it is the state of readiness per province marker selection. In the Eastern Cape, we have noted that marker selection has been completed and the 2019 markers were rolled over to 2020. However, their credentials were verified during the selection process. Markers who applied in 2019 and were not appointed were verified and appointed if they qualify. Then the challenge here was a total of 34 marker shortage were identified in the following subjects, Afrikaans and English, home language respectively. However, the recruitment of markers or the number of days of marking will be extended. So it is not really a risk because the PED is aware of this and they are dealing with this issue either by going to increase the number of days for marking of these subjects or extending the recruitment, which they are still busy with. And the training of markers also took place and it was done face-to-face. Free State, in the Free State, there are no marker shortages identified. In addition to the PD as a reserved list of markers in place, should there be unforeseen non-attendance of markers when marking resumes in January 2021. Gauteng, the GD completed the selection and appointment of markers. However, shortages were identified in the following subjects: English home language, Afrikaans home language, Afrikaans VAL, mathematical literacy, mathematics, history, agricultural science, religious studies, business studies, and accounting. If you see SC there, it means senior certificate, because remember there is a June paper and a November, rather June candidates and November candidates. So the shortages are for those subjects there, which the subjects are different from NSC and SC. However, like I've indicated in the case of the other assessment body PEDs, the GDE is also looking at that matter and they are embarking on a staggered marking approach. In addition, the DEDs also send out a memo to schools to headhunt where shortages were experienced. KZN marker selection process is also completed. And the PD has an additional marking center to cater for possible additional markers appointed for the marking of the measure exams. Additional accommodation facilities have been sourced to cater for COVID-19 protocols and social distancing. Religious studies is the only subject where there is a shortage of a very small number of 4 markers, but the PED will be able to deal with that. It's not a challenge that we can regard as a risk because they can extend by 1 or 2 days. In Popo, marker selection completed for all question papers except for English home language paper 2, Afrikaans first additional language paper 3, and Afrikaans second language paper 1 and paper 2. To cover for the shortage in the 4 papers, the PED will conduct headhunting using the marker database. In the event of headhunting does not yield the desired results, the province will extend the marking days to make sure they finish the marking. So it shows the Limpopo department is also aware and they are working on dealing with this potential risk. Process for marker selection was conducted effectively. Unlike in 2019, the PED is not going to have a staggered marking because they have increased their marking centers by 5 centers. The PED is prepared to attend the marking standardization meetings for all question papers to be administered by the province. For Mpumalanga, marker selection also concluded. There are no marker shortages in Mpumalanga. The PED has a marker reserve list in case there are challenges with COVID-19 related issues. The PED increased the number of marking centers by 4 to mitigate the challenges that can come with COVID-19. Northern Cape, there are 4 marking centers established, an increase of 1 center from the 3 of last year. Selection and appointment of markers is completed. However, at the time of audit, there were shortages of markers in history, Afrikaans home language, Setswana home language, mathematical literacy, and English 5. To make up for the shortage, again, the PD will extend the marking period by 2 additional marking days. Northwest, no marker shortage were identified in the Northwest. The PED managed the marker selection through 2 recruitment phases being issued to manage shortages, which was experienced in the initial recruitment stage. 2-day training sessions are planned for, and the marking is planned to be managed and completed in 14 days. Western Cape, the PED has systems in place to manage its marking process and has identified 10 marking centers which are well-resourced and comply to norms and standards prescribed for establishment of marking centers. There was evidence on marker shortages in a number of subjects, for example, English home language, history, but with measures in place and marking being scheduled for 18 days and commencing in January 2021, the PED will be able to address the shortage. A second round of marker nominations is planned and will include all applicants that wrote the competency tests in 2020 but could not achieve the predetermined cut score required to mark in a subject. An online training will take place, and all CMs, chief markers, and internal moderators will attend DBE marking standardization meetings and will train the senior markers and markers for 2 days prior to commencement of marking in January 2021. Now here we're looking at the systems for mark capturing. A detailed plan of expected number of mark sheets to be captured is determined, and mark capturing plans are in place across the 9 PEDs. PED plans are still to be verified by the DBE and Umalusi, and this process is scheduled for November 2020. Appointment of capturers is completed, and the number of appointees is determined and informed by the number of question papers printed and candidate entries per subject. Number of mark capturing venues are identified, and audits of sites venues are underway. The secured numbers differ from one PED to another. The protocol on health and safety is developed, and marking centers as well as centers used for capturing of marks. The levels of preparedness at and across PEDs is at an advanced stage. Management of exam irregularities. Like Mdimakwan indicated, that it is important that the assessment bodies have these committees in place so that they are able to manage the irregularities that may happen during the examinations. So Umalusi found it necessary also to verify, or rather to audit how this is panning out in the DBE and the PEDs. The National Exams Irregularity Committee is fully functional, and because this one, the National Exam Irregularities Committee is informed by issues that are happening on the ground, we need to have provincial irregularity committees, and the structures to deal with this at PED are also in place and they are functional. DBE principles used to standardize the imposition of sanctions has been circulated, and PEDs will implement it in reporting irregular cases. And this brings us to the conclusion of Umalusi's audit on the state of readiness of the DBE and the PEDs to conduct, administer, and manage the matched June and November 2020 examinations. Umalusi has conducted the evaluation on the state of readiness of the DBE PEDs. Umalusi was able to engage with the reports and evidence presented by the DBE and the PEDs. Extreme effort was taken into account by the DBE and the PEDs in relation to the restrictions brought up by the COVID-19 outbreak. Acceptable levels of readiness and related measures which are in place to ensure conduct of credible examinations by the DBE and all the PEDs were noted, and this is appreciated. Based on our observation and the reports on the SOR, Umalusi is satisfied that the DBE through the 9 PEDs is ready to conduct the merged June and November 2020 examinations. Umalusi will hold a media briefing on the state of readiness of the assessment bodies to conduct the November 2020 NSC examinations on the 30th of October 2020. Thank you, Chair. That brings us to the end of the Umalusi presentation.
Thank you very much to Umalusi. Members, can I note hands? It's 10 past 11, 11 past 11 actually. Can I note hands? I've got Honorable Mashabela who requested to speak first if she's still here because she wanted to leave at 11. And then after herself, I've got Honorable Mashes. Honorable Mashabela, are you still here?
Thank you, Chairperson. Just a quick one, as a please, because I'm leaving now. On the issue of registration of candidates, specifically of immigrant candidates from Gauteng province whose data permits will have expired by the time examination commences. Then what measures were put in place to assist the challenges of the affected candidates? The second question, Chairperson, before I leave.
She's muted. Honorable Mashabela. Hello, Llewellyn?
Chair, I'm just unmuting her.
Oh, okay.
Chairperson, I'm not sure, but I think we may have lost Honorable Mashabela.
Okay, can we allow then Honorable Mashes to proceed?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Minister, and also good morning to the department, and thank you for the different presentations. I just want to ask, I just have two questions. With regard to the slides that we saw of, mathematics, basically the subjects that have been, that learners have enrolled for, I think as a department, we should really be concerned about the fact that, mathematics and physical science have been declining, and it's not just something that has happened this year, it's been going on for years. And over again, I have raised this as an issue, because if you say as a government, you are looking into South African children, or even South African in general, to participate in the fourth industrial revolution, these enrollments are actually not showing the direction that like showing us that that's the direction that you really intend to. I don't know what are the problems there. I know that I heard that there are some interventions that have been put in place, but I would like to know, based on the number of teachers that to provide these subjects, do we have enough? Do we have adequate? And what is the department doing in order to to make sure that that we meet if there is a shortfall? And also, I don't think it's only that as well. It's the interest. It could be that learners are not interested in maths and physics, because given the fact that matric is is one of those determining factors of, whether you've passed. People don't want to see themselves failing. So what they do, they basically resort to dropping those subjects from the fear of failing their matric. And that basically results into having a lot of people, a lot of learners that have finished matric with no maths and physical science. And you know what happens if you don't have those subjects. It's very difficult for you to get into employment market. It's difficult for you to get to university, to do subjects, to have a degree that will eventually open doors for you. So by not actively, making sure that learners get into maths and physics, we are basically failing them, because then they basically end up staying at home and not doing anything. So I think we need to, there has to be a lot of emphasis on this. I cannot emphasize more on the fact that like these subjects are extremely important, because once you finish matric and you don't have those subjects, you find yourself not having any opportunities out there. And also even teachers that are coming out at high school who go into teaching courses, if they're not doing mathematics and science, they can never be. So this is basically they can never be able to really assist our learners into the subjects. So I think it's a vicious cycle. And we really need to see a more concerted effort from the department to ensure that these subjects like the learners have interest. And if a learner drops, we have to look at why a learner's dropping. It shouldn't be the fact that like, okay, yes, they don't like it, let's move on, let's get those who like the subjects. It can never be like that. We have to find a way to ensure that more and more learners enroll for this subject, because otherwise if you don't, the entire project of basic education fails, as far as I'm concerned. Secondly, the issue of the COVID-19. I know the deputy minister specifically said last week that we cannot be thinking of COVID going forward, because it is just for now. It's going to be just for next year and just for 2 years, and that's it. We cannot be thinking in those lines. But just to respond to that, if we don't have policies that deal with disaster issues going forward, should there be any other disaster, then we are going to be trying to firefighting as we've been doing as a department. So we need policies that can be able to talk to any disaster situation that we'll find ourselves in the future. You're talking about climate change, you're talking about maybe another pandemic, I don't know. But also, if you look at the plans that we are talking about as both Umalusi and a different departments from different provinces, no one is saying that no one is taking into consideration the fact that we're only going to be having a vaccine next year, and for everybody to have that access, especially South Africa being a developing country, will only be afforded the access of the vaccine only probably in 2022. So what are we doing about that? What plans do we have in place to ensure that going forward that we are prepared not only for this pandemic for the next 2 years, but also as we go forward when we write our policies and prepare ourselves for another pandemic if it comes. If not a pandemic, it can be, as I said, it can be a natural disaster. Even if the policies are not implemented, but as long as you have policies that are in place, should we find ourselves in this kind of situation, it is very important that we have to look at that, because our assessment as they're not strong enough for our learners to move over to university without writing matric exams. That is a problem. We cannot only depend on Umalusi. Umalusi, yes, they does have a very important role to play, but we cannot at the end of the day and say the only way your learners can be able to progress to university, it can only through Umalusi. There are things that we have to really look at, and I would like to hear also from Professor Vormik if he's had thoughts about, really looking beyond, say, sitting for matric should be ultimately the only way that you can be able to move towards the university. And what is it that is impeding us from doing that? What we need to do? But I know for a fact that our assessments don't allow that. But what is it that we can do? Or how flexible can we be as both Umalusi and also Department of Basic Education to address these issues going forward? Thank you.
Honorable King.
Morning, everyone. And also I'd like to appreciate the presentations that has been given. I don't have a lot of questions. My first comment that I'd like to make was to say it would have been nice if we could have seen the results for the preparatory exam. We know they just ended now, but it would have given us a clear indication on how ready are our grade 12 learners to write the exam. Have they covered the curriculum sufficiently? I know a lot of support was given to the grade 12 learners, and that is very appreciative. But we need to be realistic to the fact that most of our grade 12 learners are under severe strain and pressure, especially with the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic. And a lot of things have happened in their homes and in their communities, which will eventually have a bearing on how they perform in the exam. So in the long run, I would really appreciate if we can be furnished on the raw outcome on the preparatory exam results, just for us to get an indication of the pass rate that we are looking at. Then I would like to ask on the SBA and the PATS. Was there any adjustment made to the weighting of the SBA and PATS to assist some of our grade 12 learners? I know we didn't cover the annual teaching plans, but at least when you look at the SBA, to work around the weighting of that. So I'd just like to find out if that has been done. Then how many Elson learners in grade 12? What is the difference between the 2020 and the 2019 enrollment rates for those Elson learners? I would just like to see the difference, how many actually dropped out, and how many is actually still in the system, and what assistance we then need to give to those Elson learners to perform better next year round. Then also, let me just check. Okay, you said concession, Umalusi concession was given to those facilities, marking centers that were non-accredited. Can we just get an indication of how many of those facilities, non-accredited facilities, we will have during this examination? And also when we look at the measures that are in place to help with the marking, we will have some subjects, as you have rightfully indicated, that will not have markers available. Can we also then be given a quantifiable indication of how many of the identified subjects will we have a shortage of markers on? I know the staggered approach will be used eventually, but it would just give us an indication if we are that ready to actually make sure that those subjects in Afrikaans and English home language, business studies, are catered for because of the huge number of learners in those particular subjects. And then the last one that I just wanted to find out, just out of curiosity, are we really that certain that most of the curriculum was sufficiently covered for all grade 12s? And I'm specifically talking here to quintile 1, 2, and 3 schools, because you will find that some of the subject matters, I visited some schools in the area where I stay, and Saturday classes, and even now during this week, they're trying to cram as much into those poor learners' minds for them to go forward and pass. And you actually find that a lot was not really covered, and we're trying to cover it now during this time. What indication have most of the provinces given, realistically so, that the curriculums were covered per district? Thank you so much.
Honorable Ngobo.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson and the honorable members of the Portfolio Committee, Deputy Minister, DG, officials of the department as well. Chairperson, it makes it very difficult, I must begin by saying, to engage on these two presentations, but thank you very much for them. I'm saying it's difficult because here we are talking about steps that have already been taken to ensure readiness during exams. We're talking about things that are carried out right now, and things that are still or yet to be done. Only thing that one may do is just to acknowledge these things that are the steps that are being taken or have been taken. The one or two questions I would like to pose. The first one, it's a bit abstract question, but I would like to hear both the department and Umalusi how they would respond if one asks how confident they are about the emotional readiness of the learners. I know it's a bit abstract question, a very difficult one, because they have not said and nobody knows, and they cannot go to each and every learner and put a dipstick and come up with the results. But they must be having something to say on that one as the people responsible for our learners. And secondly, I wish to pose this one directly to Umalusi, but I think the department may say something about it also. To Umalusi, look, we are assessing. We're not only interested in a certificate, but we are assessing how much value the learner is at that particular time in terms of what he or she has acquired, not only the content of whatever he or she will be tested on. Now, if that is the case, how is Umalusi going to be testing for accreditation when these learners have not gone a full or normal mile, just like all the others have been in the past years? They have been assessing all the other ones in the past out of 10, then assess them out of 10, 10 out of 10 out of 10. But this time, we do not know at what level a particular learner is in terms of what they have acquired, for instance, in terms of content or any other elements that Umalusi considers when they at last certify one to be properly qualified to hold the paper. Those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Honorable Suela.
Thank you, Chairperson. One would like to appreciate the presentations that we just received from both the department and Umalusi, and also appreciate the effort that has gone into preparations for the forthcoming examinations. One has to ask one or two questions though, particularly with regard to the study guides. I think it's slide 9, if not 11. What I would like to know is whether these Mind the Gap study guides were given to all learners for all subjects, or it was for specific subjects. The second question, though, it's in relation to the trial examination that has just been concluded. One would have loved, just like Honorable Sugas has said, to get an indication of how the performance of the learners was like in order to gauge precisely what the outcome of the final examination is likely to be. And for Umalusi, we take note that there are some shortages of markers in some cases, but then they also indicated that in a province like Limpopo, they are likely to extend the marking period by 2 days if they don't get enough marker. We wanted that have an impact on the release of the examination in the end. Will the result be ready on time and so that everyone gets them? The last thing is with regard to the learners who probably will write these matric examinations without identification document. Whilst one acknowledges that is the responsibility of the Department of Home Affairs to assist those learners, what has the department done in order to try and assist these learners so that they get these IDs so that they are able to enroll in the event they pass at the end of the year at the institutions of higher learning? And thank you very much for your time.
Any other hand?
Yes, Chabalala.
And I can proceed. Sorry, you can proceed, Ma.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I would like also to appreciate the presentation that has been given to us. One, noting that this has been a very difficult year because of COVID-19. I think the presentation that we have been listening to right now, it gives us a hope that the things will be much better, even if the difficult conditions that we are under. And thank you very much to both department and also to Umalusi. Thank you.
Triple at once.
Thank you, Chair. Let me also greet all the honorable members, the department, our representative from Umalusi, and all the officials in the meeting. And also appreciate the briefing and the presentations that were made by the DBE and Umalusi on the readiness or school readiness for national school certificate. Chair, I think many honorable members have spoken and have raised similar or concerns, not necessarily things that we can deal with them now, but I think it's mostly advice to the department and also Umalusi on the preparations. As many have indicated that it is a difficult year for us. We had a great year last year. Our matriculants did very well, and they made history actually of obtaining more than 80% of a pass rate. And we are skeptical actually and concerned if we are going also to raise the bar or even maintain the same standard. But the challenge is the year that we're faced with. Secondly, it is for the first time under these difficult circumstances that the matriculants will be writing. Those were supposed to write in June, and now the departments are faced with more than 1 million of learners who will be writing this year. It is a huge challenge, and we are hoping that they will gather strength to pull through, because for us now is to give support and advice and see how best as members of the portfolio and also as parents and leaders of communities, we would want to see the departments yield positive results. It is not for us to judge the department
on what is not yet has been done. In fact, we should advise on what to do next, because I believe there is no one who has the reservoir of knowledge. It is us together as a team that we're supposed to assist our learners in this country to do better. Yes, they are going to face with a lot of anxiety, as we know. Some might not even want to go to, to centers, examination centers to write, because of the fear of this coronavirus. And I think the department also, it is aware, DM, under your leadership, you are aware that we were even made aware by the minister, Dr. Mkhize, that there is going to be a resurgence of coronavirus. And if when it hits the ears of those learners and teachers who are supposed to be in those centers, it means they need a lot of support from government, from us, from parents, and community at large. We must support them so that they pull through. At some point, the minister spoke of for this the year of 2020 matriculants not to carry the burden of being judged for not making a difference in or they should have carried what you call, what is the word, it's gone now, but I think you understand, of being judged about not performing of on their matric results, or performing well. And I think the department and also the schools have tried to cover the space of making sure that they would also be productive and contribute in future as the matriculants of 2020. I think, Chairperson, I heard the presentation of Umalusi, and they agree with what all the systems that are put in place by the department in making sure that they prepare for the matric metric examinations. And I also would acknowledge that and appreciate the work and the efforts that they are also doing to make sure that nothing is left behind. Thank you, Chair. With those few words, I would really like to appreciate and applaud the work that has been done up until so far, with all the challenges that we are faced with. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Adwans. Is there any other end that I might be missing? None. Okay. From my side, I think we really need to express our gratitude and thanks to DBE and Umalusi, for holding the fort. It has not been an easy year. It has been a very difficult year for everybody. But the fact that you are ready for this type of exams, it means that there's been a lot of effort and a lot of work that has been put up together for our matriculants in general to be able to write the senior certificate. And I think it's important also that we mention the fact that we applaud you for giving the in particular the psychosocial support, because this has been a mad year, I think, for all of us. And it's a year that took everybody by shock. And we are here, we are where we are now by the grace, and we are grateful for that. now the first issue that I want to raise, it's my concern, particularly on the fact of enrollments in mathematics versus mathematics literacy as a subject. I really think that a lot of work needs to be done to encourage our learners to understand the importance of doing mathematics as a subject, because I'm also comparing as well with your accounting. Is it accounting? The accounting, the numbers of enrollment actually is the lowest. It has got 97,000 enrollments. You know, those subjects that we know are more important, looks like our learners today are running away from them. The second issue that I want to raise is the issue of the printing, which I understand Dr. Polia has raised it, that you rather print later your your question papers. But one was just worried that probably other provinces are more advanced, and it then answers me actually. It means that they are also more risky in terms of printing the question papers at 100% at this level. So if there is security that whenever question papers would be needed, question papers would be there, then I'm fine with that. And then the other concern that I am having is the issue of your fraudulent of senior certificates. And I'm raising it, not really putting a blame on anyone, whether being Umalusi or DBE, but rather to mention it that we need to put really some mitigating factors. The reality is that people are still printing senior certificates which are fraudulent, and our people are still of the view of buying those senior certificates, of course, for different reasons. It might be that they are looking for employment, or it might be that they are looking for greener pastures. But the reality is that they are matric certificates are still being fraudulently given to some citizens of this country. And the other issue, which I am not really content about, is the issue of your question papers, where Western Cape um, is dealing with the issue of question papers differently from other provinces. Other provinces, your question papers are coming from districts, but then with your Western Cape, it is dealt with in terms of them going to the schools directly. What makes Western Cape to have a different approach, which of course is accepted by yourselves, which means it's authentic and it's fine. But I'm interested to understand why are they having a different approach in dealing with their question papers. And the last question is just as a matter of interest, what is the criteria that you use to appoint the examiners, the markers, and the moderators? And for just interest rate, what is the current remuneration that you are giving to those people? And those will be the questions that we are giving to yourselves, DBE and Umalusi. And preferably, I would prefer that Dr. Volmik or DM, probably you lead the responses, and after that, the Umalusi can respond, and then DBE can be the last to respond based on the number of questions that have been have been raised. Thank you very much, DM. Is DM still in the meeting? Is DM still in the meeting? No, DG?
You
know what
Chair?
I'm doing. Are you in another meeting, DM?
I'm in the meeting. It's just that I was in a short meeting. Can the officials continue to respond? I will come towards the end.
Oh, okay. No, it's fine.
Okay.
Then, Dr. Volmi, can you take over?
Yes, thank you, Honorable Chair. I will deal with just a couple of questions, and my colleague, Ms. Madam Mekwani, will deal with some as well. I think the first question that was directed at Umalusi was the question by the Honorable Maches. And I think it's got to do, she clearly, and I think correctly, has expressed concern about the decline in mathematics and science. Now, and she raised a number of questions about the quality of the teachers and the number of teachers. I think all of those are very legitimate. I think that in response, I would just like to say the following. I think it is traditionally the case that mathematics is very important and can serve as a gatekeeper for whatever post-school career you have in mind. However, the world is changing, Honorable Chair, and I do think that in time to come, which is not in the distant future, and in the light of the fourth industrial revolution, mathematics will still be required, but more importantly are things such as coding, much more important than robotics. In fact, I was in a discussion yesterday where we agreed with colleagues from the University of Cape Town that maybe what we should do is find a proper space for the competencies for the 21st century. So the traditional approach is if you don't get a particular pass in mathematics, then you don't really have a future. I think that will change. And to do coding, you could also do mathematics literacy, as long as you can deal with complexity and deal with challenging problems. Mathematics as a subject has got more to do with formalism and the symbols that frighten people. But I think, having said all that, I do think that I agree with the Honorable Machesi that the learners are drifting away from mathematics largely because they fear failure, and I think that they want to increase their chances of passing. In that regard, Honorable Chair, I just want to mention that the three-stream model that has been introduced provide alternative pathways, and the DBE officials can speak to that more. But from my personal perspective, I am hopeful that the three-stream model would allow people who do not have pure mathematics as such to still to pursue a career. I also, if I may, just deal with Honorable Novo's question. Let me come to the emotional, social and emotional issues a bit later. But the one question that the Honorable Novo has raised is, Umalusi is not just about providing a certificate. And so how are we going to make sure that we have competent people? And I want to say that our mandate as Umalusi is to assure the quality of assessments at exit points, and one of those very important exit points is the grade 12. Umalusi is therefore expected to discharge that responsibility. It's a legislative responsibility with a great sense of diligence, because it has to do with the quality of education. And I just want to say to the Honorable Noble, I agree that the public will be assured through our quality assurance mechanisms that those emerging from the school system will be able to function as competent and self-managing individuals who are active participants in the economy and who have the capacity as critical citizens. I think that is really just the comfort. I want to say though, and I think there was another question, and that is, so this year, the Honorable Novo was saying it's different, and I agree, because we take 5-year averages, and there's only so much we can do. I want to agree with going back to the Honorable Machesi that the system cannot depend on Umalusi to improve the education system. In other words, one of our members have always said, we can't change education on graph paper. We can't just by adjusting the curve believe and pretend that we've improved. The quality of education must be addressed in the classroom by competent teachers. So that's a one point. And I want to come back to finally to the Honorable Novo's point. But let me just finish the argument that the quality of teaching really is dependent on the quality of the teacher. And it's my view that consideration should be given to the development of the professional development of mathematics and science teachers. I am concerned about mathematics. The physical science seem to have moved encouragingly, but mathematics, unfortunately, has not moved. So, Honorable Noble, I just want to say that when we look at the results, we look at the last 5 years, and if there is a deviation, and we won't know that, we can't determine that a priori. We have to look at the results. And based on what we see over the 5 years and last 5 years, including this year, we will make a decision as to what adjustments becomes necessary. And we can only do so much. Although I do feel for the cohort of 2020, I'm grateful that we've all stood together to keep the standard the same. If we had lowered the standard for these learners, as difficult as the year may have been, we would have done them a disservice. They would have had to live the rest of their lives with the stigma that their matric certificate is worth less than all the other years. So I hope that that is a response. And Honorable Novo's question about the emotional readiness of candidates is hard to say. I can only imagine it wasn't easy, but it will show in the results, and we will be alert to that and make the necessary adjustments. Thank you. Ms. Madamakwani has got some other issues that were addressed to Umalusi, Chair.
Thank you, Prof, and thank you, Honorable Chair. I'll start with responding to Honorable Mashabela regarding the immigrant candidates. In terms of the processes, examination processes, we always ensure that we take decisions that are in the best interest of the candidates. So in cases where immigrant candidates do not have valid study permits, the candidates will be allowed to write the examinations and the challenges will be resolved thereafter. Then the next question was from Honorable King regarding the Umalusi concessions. I think Honorable King requested the explanation in terms of that and the numbers. In terms of the regulations for the conduct, administration and management of the NSC exams, for an independent school to be registered as an exam center, it must be accredited by Umalusi first. As a result, unaccredited centers are not allowed to conduct examinations. When concessions are granted, it means that the department takes over the administration of the exam at that center, or the department establishes a designated center where the candidates from the unaccredited center will write the examinations. However, if the honorable member would like to get the specific numbers, we can gladly provide the specific numbers to the portfolio committee. We don't have them at hand. Then the next question was the Honorable Siwela about the shortage of markers in Limpopo and the implications for extension of the marking period. For the 2020 exam cycle, the DPE has allocated more than the normal marking days that we usually provide. So more time for marking has been provided for 2020. As a result, the additional marking days that is planned by Limpopo will not have an effect at all or impact on the release of results and any other processes that follow the process of marking. And then the last response is from the chairperson regarding fraudulent certificates. This is a serious concern also for Umalusi Chair. We have noted this and we've been receiving a number of complaints and a number of reports in this regard. Umalusi has established a fraud and ethics hotline. This is an anonymous hotline where people feel free to report on any fraudulent matter regarding the Umalusi mandate. And then in addition to that, Umalusi is also responsible for verification of the certificates that we issue, and we also report on misrepresented qualifications. There are a number of cases that are being heard, and Umalusi serves as a witness in terms of the cases where people are charged for misrepresentation of qualifications and where they submit for employment fraudulent certificates. Thank you, Chair. I think that is all from my side. Thank you.
DBE?
Thank you, Chairperson. From the DBE side, I do have my colleagues who will be responding to some of the questions, but let me also maybe respond to some few of the questions that have been raised. There was an issue about the preliminary exam results. I do agree with Honorable Siwela and Honorable King that it would have been quite useful for us to, also share the results of the preliminary exam because the results of the preliminary exams actually give us a better indication of the performance of our learners. And normally this is what we use to just to get a sense of how we would be performing at the end of the year. So we are currently busy collecting data from provinces, and I have been advised by the line function that is responsible for collating these reports that by the second week of November, these results will be available. So if they are available, it means we'll have to find a way of how perhaps the study group gets also access to these results. I think we'll be advised, but by the second week of November, these results will be available. With regard to curriculum coverage, we did have, of course, challenges this year. This was not an easy year. And as we are all aware, there were a lot of, disruptions that really led to the loss of teaching time. But what we did was to all the time try to prioritize, the class of 2020. Even in terms of the return of learners to schools, they were amongst the first to come back to schools. And what we have also tried to do is to make sure that even where rotational timetables and platooning systems are in place, grade 12s are not affected at all. So we have really been making sure that they are afforded, the maximum teaching time. And we have also been, throughout since June, we have been closely monitoring curriculum coverage. In June, we conducted a teacher survey just to also determine as to how far are we with the curriculum coverage. And through the DG's one-on-one meetings with provinces, this has also been an area that provinces have been reporting on. And currently we are busy monitoring spring classes and spring camps. And we are also conducting, learner survey just to also determine whether the curriculum has been covered. And I must say, Chairperson, that up to so far, the indication that we are getting is that most of our schools were ready before they even wrote the preliminary exams. So meaning that the curriculum coverage is something that has been bothering all of us and has been closely monitored. And we are confident that most of our schools have actually covered the curriculum. And on the issue of, I know that Honorable Siwela asked about the study guides, in particular about Mind the Gap study guides. I can indicate, Chairperson, that these study guides are not for all the subjects. It's only selected subjects where we have this Mind the Gap study guide. And provinces have been quite helpful in making sure that they distribute your printed study guides to your low quintile schools, that is quintile 1 to 3 schools. And for other quintiles, your 4 to 5 quintiles, electronic copies of these study guides have been made available to these schools. The low enrollment in mathematics, Chairperson, I would agree with Honorable Machesi that this indeed is a worrisome factor that as a department we really have to pay attention to. But I also need to remind honorable members that we have introduced in the system as part of the three-stream model. The stream which we call the technical vocational stream, where learners are now doing technical maths and technical science. So this could also, contribute to the reduced number of learners who are doing pure mathematics and pure science. And I would also agree with Prof that, the three-stream model will also help in terms of diversifying the learning pathways that learners will be following. And so that, even your technical maths, your technical science, we will also have a bigger enrollment in this subject. So going forward, I still believe that there's a lot that we have to do in terms of, making sure that we have competent teachers who will be able to teach these subjects. And I can also indicate that in terms of our Funza Lushaka Bazari scheme, we have prioritized, our math, science, and technology teachers to ensure that we do have competent teachers who will be able to teach this subject. And I think I have covered some of these questions that have been asked. I am going to ask my colleagues, Dr. Polia, to speak to some of the questions that were asked, Honorable Chair, if you allow me. Dr. Polia.
Thank you, DDG. I'll add where DDG may have not covered, particularly in terms of exam administration. I think the question asked by Honorable King, were there any adjustments to the weighting of PATs and orals? The only adjustments that were made to PATs and orals would be where the PAT would have required social distancing, and therefore the PAT had to be adjusted. And where it was adjusted, we had to possibly remove a component. So if you removed a component, you then had to reduce the mark allocation. But we would have then upscaled the marks so that the weighting would still remain intact, although you may have reduced the marks. So that was only in the case of PATs and oral, particularly because learners are now using a mask, and certain aspects of the oral work would have been affected, but the weighting in essence would have been retained. In terms of ELSEN learners, we will provide the detailed figures with regard to ELSEN learners shortly. My apologies that we don't have them available at the moment, but we will make that available to the members of the Portfolio Committee. We'll also make available to the Portfolio Committee exact numbers and subjects in terms of marker shortages, and give you the mechanisms that we are going to be using to deal with that marker shortages. Provinces are currently finalizing the numbers. What we've presented are preliminary, but we will certainly come back to you with the final figures. Honorable Siwela, I think Morimo Kwana touched on that. If we extend marking time, will we affect the release date? What we've done is we've looked at the total number of scripts, we've looked at the number of markers, and we've worked out per subject how much of time will it take a province to mark a script. And remember, we have norm times in place. So we've worked out that the maximum days that you would require in terms of the bigger subjects in the bigger province would be between 14 to 16 days. But we've allowed a marking period of 18 days. So if for some reason the marking has to go over the maximum of 14 to 16 days, we still have a buffer period of 2 days. So it will certainly not impact on the release date. Honorable Siwela also raised the issue of ID documents. Currently, ID document is not compulsory for registration. However, the learner must produce his ID document at some point in order to confirm that he is the candidate that wrote the examination. And we want to move to making ID documents compulsory so that we reduce in terms of the fraud that can take place. And we are working together with Home Affairs. We have a partnership arrangement with them where they have mobile officers that will go to our schools and assist particularly our grade 12 learners with attaining their ID documents. So we have a high percentage of our full-time learners that have ID documents. It's more the part-time and adult learners that we still need to advocate and target in terms of getting them to get their ID documents. Chairperson raised the concern with regard to printing, and rightfully so, Chairperson. I think one looks at the figures, it does create some concern, but I want to assure you, Chairperson, that there was meticulous planning that goes into the printing and the printing duration. Now, if you look at the figures, some provinces are low and some are high. Now, when we determine the printing schedule, it's based on the printing capacity of a province. Now, you and I are aware that it depends on the printing machine that the province has and the printing speed. Now, in some provinces, that which would take one province 1 day to print. For example, if you look at life sciences, 100,000 question papers would possibly take one province 7 days to print, while in another province, it will possibly take that province 3 days, because they have highly sophisticated machines that work at an extremely rapid pace and they can complete it. So in calculating the duration which we provided, it was based on all of these factors. But we can keep Portfolio Committee updated if that's an issue, just to indicate that we are on target and that on the date of the examination, like they say, no more ganjani, the question paper will be on the desk of the learner in the quantity required, allowing the learner to write the examination. Just to add with regard to fraudulent certificates, I think Modi Mukwana raised the issue, but I want to also say that both Umalusi as well as the DBE as well as PDEs have a verification service. So employers together with higher education institutions will verify their certificates that they receive with the DBE. And on a daily basis, DBE Umalusi picks up fraudulent certificates, and this is brought to the attention of the employer. So that is the safety net that we have. And Umalusi has put in a number of security features into a certificate, which is virtually impossible for these fly-by-night shops that try to duplicate these certificates. The WCED issue raised by Chairperson, I agree with you. It stands out as a sore thumb. Now, let me indicate, Chairperson, that this has been a historical practice in the Western Cape, that coming from the ex-departments, question papers were stored at the school, and we have on numerous occasions written from the level of our minister to the MEC to indicate that they need to move to a uniform procedure that needs to be followed across all provinces. But there's been resistance, and therefore, on the basis of their resistance, we now audit them as a storage point and make sure that they comply. And obviously, we monitor them very closely. But like I said, given the fact that they have this electronic system in place, it gives us comfort and confidence that even though they're following an alternative modality, that modality is highly secure. But we'll continue to raise this as an issue with the WCED, and hopefully we'll be able to get to a point where all provinces follow the same approach. Chairperson, you also wanted to know about remuneration of markers. Currently, the tariff is 222 Rand for a marker, and it's based on a sliding scale, 241 Rand for senior markers and 259 Rand for your deputy chief markers. So that gives you more or less a sense of what the tariff is. I think DDG, we've covered all the, I think Honorable Machesi raised about, are we preparing for future disasters of this nature? And I must say, Chairperson, that this has been an eye-opener, and we realized that to an extent we were caught unawares. And Dr. Maboya has got us to look at more longer-term plans in terms of the curriculum, in terms of the assessment. And one of the issues we think that we need to focus on is getting the teacher to be able to make the professional judgment in terms of curriculum implementation, in terms of assessment in particular. And teachers will now have to work at their own pace, given the fact that each school, each classroom may not have the same amount of time to cover a particular amount of the curriculum. And therefore, we are working on what we're calling more formative, more school-based assessment strategies, which we need to strengthen. And there's a program that we're putting in place to be able to improve the assessment capacity of our teachers. I think DDG I've covered. I'm not sure whether Mrs. Western needs to come in. Thank you, Chairperson.
Is there anyone still coming in?
No, thank you, Deputy Minister. I think Dr. Maboya and Dr. Polya has adequately covered all the questions. Thank you, dear.
Thank you, Chair. I think all the questions, I've been going through the questions as they are responding, and to me, they are sufficiently covered. Maybe if I can add just to say, in all what the department and Umalusi are doing is for the best interest of the child. And the question, I can see now that Honorable Swela's network keeps on coming in, going out. But on the learners who do not have documents, they are given special examination numbers and they do right. But the problem becomes when they have to go to the university. They don't access university, they don't access any employment when coming to them not having IDs. That's the challenge. And yes, when they are still at school, it looks like it's a challenge of education, but it's our challenge. We are happy that Department of Home Affairs is coming on board, but the learners that are being helped currently with the Home Affairs system, Chair, are those whose parents are legally in the country. Those ones are being helped, but those who came illegally, yes, we lost a case that we must accept them, they must all be at school. But the challenge is Home Affairs still does not have a way of registering such learners, giving them identification of some kind. That's the dilemma that we find ourselves in, and it affects mostly higher education than basic education. So this is the response. And Chair, my apologies that I had to be busy with something else which was very urgent, which I had to attend to when we were to start responding to questions. But this is our response. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, DM. Members, is there any member who feel that is not adequately responded to? None. Okay. No, thank you very much, DM. Like I've said, thank you very much, Prof. and DPE officials for the adequate responses. Like we have said that we are wishing you all the best. I understand Umalusi will have a press briefing on this Friday to also outline their readiness to the public, and all the best with that. All the best also with the examinations starting from next week. We are confident as the committee as well that you are ready now. And like we've said, it has been a tough year, and we just wish you all the best, and we hope and wish that our matriculants are going to make us proud again next year when we get to see the results. From now, we are going to release the DPE and Umalusi, and we will be just in committee so that we adopt the minutes of the previous meeting. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, DM. Thank you very much, Prof. All the best.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Bye, Chair.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Chairperson.
Can you flag the minutes, Llewellyn?
Thank you, and bye-bye, Chair, and the committee.
Bye, DG. It's 12, honorable members. In front of me, we've got the joint meeting of ourselves and the select committee. The meeting that was on Friday, the 23rd of October at 1 till 4 o'clock. We were having a briefing from the Northern Cape and Gauteng department. First page, you've got your attendance by committee members, and then you've got your attendance by the members from the select committee, and then you've got your attendance by officials from DBE, and then you've got your attendance by the Northern Cape Department of Education, and then Gauteng, and then you've got the attendance by the parliamentary staff as well. We have opened the meeting and we have welcomed everybody. The delegation from DPE was led by the Deputy Minister, Dr. Mhaule, and then we had an address by DM. And then after that, we had the presentation, which was led by Beuzana. And then we had a presentation, from Gauteng, which was led by Mr. Chani. And then those are the issues that were raised. And after that, we had a presentation from Northern Cape, which was led by the HOD, acting HOD Beuzana. And those are the committee observations on page 6 that were made by the members. And then we had responses which were led by the Deputy Minister. And then Gauteng started on giving the responses. And then after that, we had the Northern Cape, which was led by their MEC, Monakali. And then we considered and adopted the minutes of the 20th of October. And then the meeting adjourned at 3:28. Any corrections? In the absence of correction, can we adopt the minutes, honorable members?
I move to adopt, Chair.
Honorable Adwans is moving. Any seconder? Any seconder, honorable members? Hi, Boba Pabant, where are the people?
It's corner, Chair, but I was not present on the meeting.
Where are the people that were present? Babu Ngobo? Suela left, I saw.
Honorable Chairperson, hello?
Yes, Babu Ngobo?
Yes. Honorable Chairperson, I'm battling with the culture, but I heard the chairperson calling my name. I know it's with regards to the minutes. The issue, Honorable Chairperson, is, as far as I remember, I did not attend
You were not part of the meeting.
this
Okay.
meeting
All right.
at the last meeting. Yes,
Okay,
yes, Chairperson.
okay, let me then second the minutes. Let me then say, okay, Honorable Ngobo, that's fine. Let me then second the minutes. And then our next meeting is on Friday, this coming Friday. We are going to have a presentation from the Eastern Cape and Free State. It's a continuation of provinces on the impact of COVID-19.
Chair, what time the meeting will be? Because I'm attending dialysis on Friday.
I think it's at 9, Llewellyn?
9
No,
in the morning,
Chairperson.
that's bedtime for me.
No, Chairperson,
No,
unfortunately, because of the NCOP meeting in the morning, we'll only start that meeting at 1500.
Oh, that's better.
It's gonna be at 3 o'clock then, Mashabalala.
Thank you very much. No, that
We
will
will
cover
have
me.
to wait. Okay. We will have to
Thank
wait
you.
for the NCOP to finish their morning engagement.
Okay.
So our meeting is at 3 o'clock then on Friday. Thank you very much,
Chair.
honorable members. The meeting then is adjourned.
Thank you. Bye, Chair.